The grocery money ran out on Wednesday, but by Friday night, every plate at the table was still full. That was how your grandparents ate. Not because they had enough, but because they knew what to do when they did not. Some of these meals came from church cookbooks handed out at potlucks. Some came from neighbors who had even less than you did. A few were born from pure desperation, the kind where you open the cabinet and all you find is flour, an onion, and a can of evaporated milk, and somehow dinner still lands on the table. You will hear about a stew that cost almost nothing and fed a family of 6 for 2 straight days. You will find a casserole built on stale bread and whatever cheese was left in the drawer, and you will recognize at least a dozen of these from your own childhood. In Texas, as well as New York, rice with raisins started becoming a really popular dish among the middle class and a breakfast that many children grew up on, especially in Indian American communities, which were sparse at the time, but they were still there every other block or two. It was already customary to eat rice with milk and raisins there, so they brought it to America, and others took note. They were not the only ones to introduce it, though, since Chinese Americans also had their own take on the recipe that led to a more custard-like variant. When people could not afford to even eat rice pudding, they would make their rice and eat it with different kinds of nuts and raisins. The idea spread like wildfire in states like Alabama and Arkansas and the Midwest overall. In Michigan, it was a pretty common choice to use brown sugar and cinnamon whenever available. Are you a big fan of deli food? Deli meats, sandwiches, loaves, that kind of thing? Then one of the best parts of that kind of eating was the olive loaf. It was usually made with pork and beef plus chopped green olives, which is what it became known for. There was a small, brief period before convenience foods started taking over America, where processed meats were really becoming a thing, and this dish was a big part of that time, which arguably spanned all over the 1940s to the 1970s. It had an extremely loyal fan base too, as this was responsible for many deli counters still staying in business. These days, you could find retro stalls that still do a mean olive load, but the days where this was a commonplace item on the street and something you'd see your grandma cooking up are long gone in America's history. People definitely remember the flavors of the bologna, the ham loaves, and all the amazing dips they came with, though. Up next, we have a dish that was all about making the most out of simple ingredients: spaghetti, boiled carrots, and white sauce casserole. It can be argued that Eleanor Roosevelt did the best she could during the Great Depression. The First Lady promoted dishes to encourage savvy homemakers, such as a casserole made from spaghetti, boiled carrots, and a simple white sauce of milk, flour, salt, and butter. The spaghetti had to be cooked for 25 minutes. The idea was to get the noodles mushy so they paired nicely with the boiled carrots and a penny's worth of creamy sauce. The result? A vehicle for nutrition and nutrients. Families loved this dish because it was versatile and could easily be modified based on what was available. It was a great way to fill up hungry bellies without breaking the bank. It still makes a pretty delicious meal for potlucks, so if you want to impress everyone with something easy to whip up, the spaghetti, boiled carrots, and white sauce casserole will do. Orange gelatin soufflé. Cups brought a cheerful glow to every picnic spread. Instant pudding was whipped together with gelatin and a splash of fresh orange juice until it became light and airy. The mixture was poured into individual cups and chilled until softly set, forming a dessert that looked like a true soufflé, but required no oven at all. When served, the cups revealed a pale orange hue and a delicate citrus scent that lifted spirits on even the warmest days. Topped with a dollop of lightly sweetened whipped cream, they offered a smooth, creamy bite that melted instantly on the tongue. Churchgoers admired how quickly these treats could be prepared while still looking fancy enough for a special gathering. Children loved the bright color and gentle wobble that made each spoonful fun, while adults found the flavor refreshingly light after a plateful of savory dishes. This dessert proved that with a few pantry staples and a bit of creativity, even the simplest recipe could bring joy to a crowd gathered in faith and friendship. Date and orange marmalade. Sandwich combined the deep caramel sweetness of cooked dates with the bright citrus zing of orange marmalade to create a filling that tasted like sunshine captured between 2 slices of wheat bread. Home cooks discovered it through women's magazines in the 1940s when sugar shortages made dates a practical, natural sweetener. The marmalade added a fragrant bitterness that balanced the richness of the dates, turning each bite into a layered experience of sweet tart and slightly bitter flavors, often served at afternoon teas and bridal showers. The sandwich brought a touch of elegance without expensive ingredients. Its vibrant color and unique taste impressed guests who expected plain fare, but instead found something sophisticated. It kept well without refrigeration, which made it ideal for picnics and train journeys. Though rarely seen today, the date and orange marmalade sandwich remains a reminder of a time when simple pantry staples could become a striking treat worthy of any gathering. Salisbury steak patties with gravy mix offered a hearty plate in minutes, transforming ground beef into something that tasted like a slow Sunday supper. Lean beef was seasoned with onion powder, garlic, and a splash of Worcestershire, then shaped into oval patties and seared in a skillet until crisp on the outside and juicy inside. While the meat browned, a packet of instant brown gravy whisked together with water created a smooth sauce in a separate pan. Once the patties were done, they were nestled into the bubbling gravy for a final simmer that coated them in rich flavor. Served over mashed potatoes or buttered toast, the meal felt far more elaborate than the clock revealed. Working parents loved the speed and the hearty comfort, while children scooped up every drop of gravy with the last crust of bread. It was a dinner that turned a simple pound of beef into something warm, filling, and memorable, the kind of dish that proves convenience and care can live on the same plate. Leftover roast vegetable sandwiches were the kind of meal grandparents made when they refused to let anything go to waste. After dinner, they would gather whatever vegetables were left in the pan, fry them up in a little oil or leftover drippings, and stack them high between slices of bread. Carrots, potatoes, onions, squash, and anything else that happened to be sitting in the bowl all came together into something far better than you expected. The heat revived them, bringing back the flavors that had dulled after sitting out, and the bread turned it into a portable, handheld feast. It tasted warm, smoky, and rich, like something you would order from a corner cafe that prided itself on rustic charm. Grandparents knew how to stretch leftovers into entirely new meals, and this sandwich was one of their greatest hits. It was cheap, filling, and comforting, giving you a whole second dinner out of what everyone else would have thrown away. Eating it reminded you that grandparents never needed a recipe to impress you. They just needed a skillet, a little oil, and the sense to know that food could always be made new again. These sandwiches were thick, messy, and unforgettable, carrying with them the memory of kitchens where nothing was ever wasted and everything was always used with care. Pinto bean patties on cornbread slabs were what happened when meat ran out, but pride did not. You would mash yesterday's beans, season them with onion or lard, and fry them into rough little cakes. Then you slapped them between thick slices of cornbread, maybe dry, maybe still warm if you were lucky. It was heavy, filling, and shockingly good. Pinto beans were the backbone of frontier food, cheap, storable, and full of the kind of energy you needed for long days and longer nights. The patties crisped up on the outside but stayed creamy inside, making them feel almost indulgent. Cornbread was dry by the next day, but once you stacked it with beans and fried edges, it came alive again. This sandwich fed whole families when flour was low and meat was gone. It was about turning scraps into something hot, fried, and filling. Something you could eat with two hands and still taste an hour later. Peanut butter fudge bars were the candy that disappeared from holiday plates faster than anything else, mostly because children circled the dessert table like hungry little satellites. Back before fancy peanut butter cups and packaged sweets took over, these bars were the main event. You melted butter, sugar, and milk on the stove, stirred in a generous scoop of peanut butter, and watched the whole mixture turn thick and glossy. When you poured it into a pan and let it cool, it set into dense squares that tasted like the richest peanut butter imaginable. Every bite stuck to the roof of your mouth in the best way, sweet and creamy and warming. People stopped making them once candy aisles grew louder and more crowded, but these old-fashioned bars still hold a place in the memories of anyone who grew up watching a parent scrape the last bit of fudge from the pot with a wooden spoon. Speaking of Southern cuisine creeping into other corners of the country, pimento cheese sandwiches are the quintessential Southie dish to talk about. As far as sandwiches go, they've pretty much nailed the formula. You have a taste you won't really forget thanks to the wonderful usage of pimento cheese, which is really just cheddar cheese mixed with small red peppers known as pimentos. Then, you have the sauces and vegetables. People like to keep it pretty simple, nothing too fancy. They'd throw in some red onions, or normal ones, and cloves of garlic. Some cayenne pepper and jalapenos would make it even spicier, but some people really preferred their cheese sandwiches that way. I know that at least more than a few people really enjoyed doing it this way, up in the South. As far as sauces went, most people stuck to Worcestershire sauce for how it would really add some depth to the dish. The pimento cheese sandwich was one of the best things to come out of the South because it was such an affordable and delicious meal to make. Pimento cheese wasn't really the hardest thing to get. If you lived near any kind of grocery store, then there was a pretty good chance they had it. Most people in the South also either grew their own peppers or had dedicated shops and spots for where they'd go. Everyone had their own favorites when it came to where they'd like to get their vegetables, so depending on the harvest, you'd also get some pretty different tastes. You might think that boiled animal hooves are something that only a survivalist would eat, and indeed, during the Dust Bowl, they were the only thing keeping some families going. When meat became unaffordable and gelatin packets were a luxury, hooves came in handy, literally and metaphorically. Animal hooves, preferably cow or pig, were used and boiled to make a broth that was as useful and as ugly-sounding as it can get in our ears today. The long cooking process tenderized collagen present in hooves and made it into a natural binder for soups, stews, and even sweets. Yes, you heard it correctly, desserts. Gelatin from hooves was the secret behind the wobble in aspics, jellies, and custards. This was not about getting by. It was about getting the most out of each part of the animal. Hooves cooked were a rich source of protein and minerals and were a great food source during the lean periods. And even though they were not the most attractive, they ensured that bellies were filled and bodies were built. Today, such concepts as boiling hooves may cause some people to have goosebumps. However, in those days, it was business as usual. Dust Bowl meals were about subsistence, and at times, subsistence entails getting creative with what is available, or hoof. Pimento cheese and pineapple sandwich balanced savory and sweet in a way that captured the playful creativity of mid-century American cooking classic pimento cheese provided creamy sharpness, while juicy pineapple rings added a burst of tropical sweetness that kept every bite exciting. The combination might sound surprising, but it was beloved at picnics and bridge clubs, where hosts aimed to impress with unexpected pairings during the 1950s. Canned pineapple was inexpensive and widely available, while pimento cheese remained a Southern staple, making the sandwich affordable and accessible. The tangy cheese melded with the fruit's bright flavor to create a filling that was both hearty and refreshing. Guests remembered its cheerful colors and satisfying mix of textures long after the plates were cleared. Today, the pimento cheese and pineapple sandwich stands as a delicious reminder that bold flavor contrasts can produce timeless recipes that deserve to be rediscovered and enjoyed once again. Fish stick. Po' boy brought a taste of the Gulf Coast to busy kitchens using only what sat in the freezer. Packaged fish sticks baked or pan-fried until their coating turned golden and crunchy, while soft sandwich rolls warmed in the oven. Tartar sauce was stirred together with chopped pickles, a squeeze of lemon, and a little mustard, filling the kitchen with a tangy scent. Shredded lettuce and thin tomato slices waited on the counter, ready to add freshness and color. As soon as the fish sticks finished, they were stacked inside the rolls, drizzled with the cool sauce and topped with the crisp vegetables. The contrast of hot, flaky fish and chilled toppings tasted like a seaside lunch, even on a weeknight far from the water. In less than 15 minutes, a handful of inexpensive ingredients became a meal that felt special, making families forget how quickly it came together. Every crunchy bite delivered the carefree feeling of a coastal vacation without leaving the house, a reminder that a freezer staple can still capture the spirit of a faraway kitchen when imagination and hunger meet. Potato soup became the warm embrace that greeted many families on Christmas morning when nothing else filled the pantry. Potatoes cost only pennies per pound even in the hardest years and could be stored in root cellars for months without spoiling. Mothers would dice whatever potatoes remained from fall harvest, simmering them slowly with onions in water or milk until the mixture thickened naturally into creamy filling soup. The aroma of simmering onions and tender potatoes filled small kitchens, creating warmth that went beyond temperature. Some families added bacon grease for richness, while others stretched the soup by crumbling day-old bread into each bowl. Children gathered around tables covered with oilcloth, hands wrapped around warm bowls that chased away December chill. Potato soup required no expensive ingredients, no special equipment, just patience and willingness to turn humble vegetables into something that tasted like love. It was Christmas dinner for those who had nothing else to serve. Coconut ice was the cheerful little candy that looked like it came straight out of a storybook thanks to its pink and white layers. It showed up in mid-century cookbooks everywhere, especially those that loved simple recipes that stretched ingredients as far as possible. Coconut, sugar, and milk were mixed into a thick, sweet dough, pressed into a pan, and split into two halves so that one could be tinted the softest holiday pink. After it chilled, the slab was sliced into neat squares that looked like tiny edible presents. Children loved the color, adults loved the sweetness, and everyone agreed it felt special despite its humble ingredients. You do not see coconut ice much anymore, maybe because modern desserts prefer elegance over charm. But for the families who made it, one bite still brings back the gentler holidays of the 1950s and 1960s. Comfort food in the 1940s could not be discussed without somebody bringing up American slumgullion. This was really hot in the Midwest and the South, mostly by its other name of goulash. The dish has been in recipes and cookbooks since at least 1913, and it would include ground beef simmered in a tomato sauce. It was a dish for nights that you really wanted to make matter, and it was also a great way to keep the nutrition and protein intake up. Think of it as like a kind of casserole, and if you have heard of it before, you should know the 1930s versions were a bit different. These ones involved no pasta or macaroni or cheese. Those would become staples of the dish much later on, and we have grandparents to thank for that too. Hoppin' John is a dish that has some pretty rich heritage. I'm talking about African, Caribbean, and Native American roots that all boil together in the melting pot known as the South, where it first started becoming really trendy. However, the origins of the dish are actually a bit darker than just a happy coincidence that somehow got into everyone's table. Though the people who were eating it happily wouldn't know, it was first created and brought over by enslaved Africans in the American South. It made use of African rice and pork, and yes, the best part of the dish were the black-eyed peas even in those times. Now, as far as the name Hoppin' John is considered, nobody really ever knew where it first came from, or if there was a John who made this dish and brought it into everyone's lives, but the first time this name was mentioned was in the 1840s in a print. If you were down in the South and African American communities during New Year, then you would especially see a lot of Hoppin' Johns everywhere. The aroma of those peas and the smoked pork wouldn't miss anyone's nose, as the scent carried for miles and miles away. It was eaten specifically on New Year's because it was a common belief that eating Hoppin' Johns would bring good luck to people if they ate it to start the year. If you went into any new year with such a good plate of food, I'd say your luck was already pretty good. So maybe it does work? So, peanut butter stuffed baked onion might sound strange, but trust me, it's worth a try. We're taking a whole onion, hollowing it out and stuffing it with peanut butter. Then, we're going to bake it until the onion is caramelized and sweet. It sounds like an odd pairing, but the salty, creamy peanut butter and the sweet onion actually complement each other really well. This dish was a unique way to combine protein and vegetables. It might not be everyone's cup of tea, but it was a clever way to make a filling meal out of inexpensive ingredients. Plus, onions were a staple in many households because they were stored well and added flavor to almost any dish. It was one of the more outlandish food recipes to come out of the Great Depression, and food historians Andrew Coe and Jane Ziegelman, authors of A Square Meal, are certainly no fans. So am I. If you believe that eating insects is a modern, sustainable practice, you are wrong. In the Dust Bowl, Crispy fried grasshoppers were not a joke. They were a staple food. During the poor harvests, and when meat was hard to come by, farmers looked to the hordes of grasshoppers feeding on the crops. Talk about revenge dining. Hunting grasshoppers was a family event, and when you had gathered enough grasshoppers in a bucket, then the cooking process started. They were washed, marinated, and then fried to a crisp golden brown. The result? A crunchy snack that contained protein and was not too shabby if one didn't consider what they were consuming. Grasshoppers are in fact a form of superfood as they contain high protein, iron, and good fats. The Dust Bowl families were not consciously trying to innovate, but they were able to feed themselves in a way that many others could not. Also, if you fry anything, it automatically becomes at least 50% tastier, doesn't it? Nowadays, insects are being considered as a source of food, but in the past, crispy grasshoppers were a means of feeding oneself. Soda pop pound cake cups turned an ordinary boxed mix into a church picnic marvel that delighted every sweet tooth in the crowd. Home bakers poured orange soda straight into yellow cake batter, skipping milk or water, which gave the cupcakes a fragrant citrus lift and a tender crumb that stayed moist for hours. The carbonation worked magic in the oven, creating a light, airy texture, while the soda's sugar deepened the golden color of the crust. Each cupcake baked quickly in paper liners so they could be passed around to children running barefoot across the grass or packed into baskets without worry. A thin glaze of powdered sugar and a few spoonfuls of the same soda finished them off with a bright, sticky sheen that caught the sunlight and made them shine. Guests were amazed at how a single bottle of soda transformed a humble mix into something worth writing down. And cooks loved how easy it was to prepare large batches when time was short, and the fellowship hall was already buzzing with music and laughter. These little cakes were proof that a playful idea and a splash of soda could turn a simple treat into a memory of summer joy and community spirit. Chicken salad with grape sandwich became a tea room favorite, where tender diced chicken mixed with creamy mayonnaise and halved grapes for a touch of natural sweetness and elegant contrast. The juicy grapes brightened the savory chicken, while chopped celery often added crunch, making the sandwich both refreshing and hearty. Women's magazines of the 1940s and 50s showcased it as the perfect luncheon choice for bridal showers and Sunday gatherings, using leftover roast chicken kept it economical. While grapes lent a touch of luxury, families loved how easily it could be made ahead and served, chilled on soft rolls or delicate finger sandwich slices. Even children enjoyed the gentle sweetness which balanced the richness of the mayonnaise as fashions shifted toward simpler deli meats. This refined combination faded from everyday menus, but it remains a timeless reminder of mid-century hospitality and the way a few well-chosen ingredients could elevate a simple sandwich into a meal that felt special without being extravagant. Sloppy Joe skillet brought a sweet tang to busy weeknights when there was barely time to sit, let alone cook. Ground beef hit the hot skillet first, sizzling as it browned while the cook stirred in chopped onions and a quick sauce of tomato paste, vinegar, brown sugar, and a shake of paprika. Within minutes, the mixture thickened into a rich, saucy filling that perfumed the kitchen with a scent both savory and slightly sweet. Soft sandwich rolls were split and warmed while the beef bubbled, ready to soak up every drop. The sloppy name came alive the moment the mixture met the bread, spilling deliciously over the sides and begging for napkins. Families loved how it stretched a small amount of meat across several sandwiches, and children delighted in the messy fun of every bite. Fast, filling, and friendly to any budget, the Sloppy Joe skillet earned its place as a dependable working man's dinner that felt like a small party at the table. Cold meatloaf sandwiches were the unsung heroes of leftover night. The kind of meal that made you forget leftovers did not always have to feel like a downgrade. A slice of meatloaf, chilled just enough to hold its shape, was placed between soft bread and topped with mustard, ketchup, or whatever condiments were around. Grandparents knew the trick. Cold meatloaf had flavor that settled in overnight, making every bite taste even better than it did the day before. The sandwich felt like something you would order from a deli, thick, meaty, and packed with flavor that did not need any heating up. It was the definition of cheap food tasting expensive. grandparents sliced it with the kind of confidence that came from thousands of meals served over a lifetime, and they always knew exactly how thick the slice needed to be to make the sandwich perfect. You would bite into it and suddenly remember how good simple food could be. Cold meatloaf sandwiches were proof that leftovers could shine, that yesterday's dinner could become today's comfort, and that grandparents had a way of making everything feel just a little better with the right touch. Crispy pancake sandwich with dried peach butter was the kind of breakfast for dinner trick that made even the leanest pantry feel like a treat. Folks would fold up a pair of thin griddle cakes, sometimes crisped on cast iron until the edges curled and browned, and smear the inside with dried peach butter, if they had it. The butter was a stretch of summer sealed in a jar, made from boiled down fruit leather and a little sugar if it could be spared. The pancakes acted like an edible envelope, trapping sweetness that softened the wear of hard living. It wasn't just kids who loved it. Tired men coming in from chopping wood or herding cattle would bite in with a kind of silent gratitude. The butter would melt ever so slightly from the residual heat of the pancake, and suddenly the air smelled like sun-warmed orchards. Sometimes folks added a pinch of salt or a dab of lard for depth, and if the peach butter ran out, they used plum or apple, or even mashed dried prunes if that's what was left. It was comfort disguised as necessity, a pocket of hope you could hold in your hand. Cream cheese mints were the soft pastel candies that looked like tiny ornaments on Christmas tables. Made from cream cheese, powdered sugar, and peppermint, they were both refreshing and sweet, like winter air wrapped in sugar. Children scooped the dough into small balls, pressed them into little molds, and dusted them with sugar. Each mint came out with delicate patterns shaped like bells or trees. They dried just enough to form a light shell while staying soft inside. These mints showed up at gatherings, weddings, church socials, and anywhere a pretty candy was needed. They were simple, cheap, and festive. Over time, the tradition faded, but older generations remember them as a symbol of homemade hospitality. They tasted like nostalgia in pastel form. Speedies are also something you would find at gatherings for family or just friends, mostly because no party is complete without a good platter of meat skewers going around a few drinks. So, mostly people would enjoy these most when the meat was lamb, but some areas like California would use chicken or beef too. It was really the grilling where the magic happened. These plates of Speedies set the mood in a party alight. It was a taste that, when they experienced it, people at a party knew that they were in for a really good time. The kind of dish that gets a crowd excited and hungry. There were even Speedafests in Binghamton and all around New York in general. It was a part of the local culture that no big celebration was really complete without. The reason it got popular wasn't just because of a regional preference in New York, though. The dish was bold, tangy, and citrusy, and it could double as an amazing sandwich too. You would find these in street stalls throughout New York, as well as at homes, but nowadays the dish has faded away into irrelevance. Potatoes had more use than just what was under all the layers. Once peeled, people would often fry the potato skins as a midday snack. Nothing would ever go to waste in homes back then, as you must have gathered by now. If they can make stuff out of sausage drippings and drain the fat from bacon to reuse, frying up some potato skins does not seem that out of the box at all. These fried skins were the perfect sidekick to potato pancakes, and the fact that the skins had a lot of health benefits made it all the more appealing. Things like this really helped to keep appetites in check, and that meant that the financial situation of the home would be calmer too. Brown Betties were one of the most classic American desserts to ever grace the table of an American kid. Something that might be seen as an old-fashioned dessert now, but used to be the next best thing after an apple pie. The flavors of a Brown Betty usually come from the spiced apples and other fruit-layered dishes, which are really buttery. The sugary breadcrumbs on top give it a crunch, which really adds to the entire vibe of the Brown Betty. You're looking for a warm, comforting dish that gets you in a nostalgic mood. Something you can sit down with and enjoy bite for bite, not rush through. It's an experience that you want to savor, like an empty, windy street as you walk down by and enjoy it. The Brown Betty was definitely something that would get you up out into the street, whether you were going to visit your grandma's for an authentic pie or a nearby bakery to reminisce about childhood days. The earliest recipes you can find are the ones from 1866, but those are more like Apple Betty's than the ones we're talking about. Either way, this dish has definitely evolved alongside the population, and those who grew up with it will remember it fondly. The Great Depression might not have the most appetizing recipes, but the era did give the world the Kraft macaroni and cheese dinner. In 1937, Kraft heard about a salesman for the Tenderoni Macaroni Company of St. Louis going rogue and selling his noodles with packets of Kraft grated cheese attached. They hired the man to promote the concept and started selling it to cash-strapped Americans at the low price of 19 cents for 4 servings. Some variations of this comfort food even included cooked vegetables or even a can of tuna. It was a great way to feed the family without spending a lot of money, and it quickly became a favorite for kids and adults alike. Even today, it remains a beloved comfort food. Hot slaw. Sandwich turned leftover cabbage into a warm and hearty meal that fit perfectly with the frugal habits of the Great Depression. Families would shred cabbage, onions, and carrots, then cook them down with vinegar, sugar, and a hint of mustard until the mixture became tender and tangy. This hot slaw was piled generously onto buttered buns or thick slices of bread, making a filling dinner when meat was out of reach. The heat of the slaw softened the bread slightly, creating a comforting texture that felt indulgent. Despite its simple ingredients, diners and boarding houses across the Midwest served it as a reliable daily special, while home cooks appreciated how it stretched a small garden harvest into a satisfying supper. Its aroma of sweet and sour cabbage would fill the kitchen and invite everyone to the table long after those lean years ended. The memory of that steaming sandwich lingered as proof that thrift and taste can live side by side. Breakfast for dinner. Pancake stack with bacon turned a morning favorite into a fun and filling evening meal. Flour, milk, eggs, and a little baking powder whisked together quickly to form a smooth batter that poured onto a sizzling griddle, sending up a sweet, buttery aroma. Each pancake bubbled and browned in just minutes, ready to stack high while crisp bacon strips cooked in a nearby skillet. The smoky scent of bacon mingled with the warm fragrance of fresh pancakes, creating a kitchen atmosphere both cozy and exciting. Butter melted between layers, while a slow drizzle of warm maple syrup cascaded over the stack, soaking each fluffy round. The salty bacon provided the perfect counterpoint to the soft, sweet pancakes, making every bite a blend of textures and tastes. Families loved the playful switch of serving breakfast at the end of the day, and cleanup was minimal, leaving more time to relax. In less than 20 minutes, this meal offered pure comfort and a gentle reminder that the best dinners are sometimes the ones that break the rules in the most delicious way possible. Fried egg sandwiches were a masterpiece of minimalism, the kind of breakfast that proved you did not need money to start the day with something that tasted like it came from a diner griddle. Grandparents cracked eggs with the confidence of people who had cooked thousands of them, frying each one until the edges crisped up and the center stayed soft enough to melt into the bread. A little butter, a pinch of salt, and suddenly you had a sandwich that felt warm, rich, and comforting in that way only simple foods can be. The yolk would soak slightly into the bread, turning each bite into a soft and savory mouthful that felt like a hug in food form. It was filling without being heavy, cheap without tasting cheap, and somehow felt like both breakfast and lunch depending on the day. Grandparents made these sandwiches with no fuss, no recipe, no second guessing. Just instinct and practice. And the result always tasted better than anything you could buy. Fried egg sandwiches had the quiet charm of a diner classic, something you could imagine served with a cup of coffee in a small-town cafe, yet it came from the most modest kitchen ingredients. That is why people remember them so fondly. They tasted like care, like routine, like mornings spent with someone who wanted to start your day off right. Buffalo jerky sandwiches were not about tenderness. You would soak the dried meat in water or coffee until it gave up a little of its resistance, then layer it between flatbread or slap it over beans and mustard. It was a food made for teeth and silence. The flavor was smoky, wild, and as tough as the men who chewed it. Buffalo meat had fed tribes and wagon trains alike, but by the late 1800s, finding it meant you either hunted it yourself or knew someone who did. Most of the jerky was homemade, pounded thin with rocks and left to dry on sun-baked hides. Sandwiches made from it were makeshift, but they packed a punch of flavor that stayed with you long after the meal was gone. If you had pickles or wild onion, you might toss some in. If not, you chewed and waited for the salt to wake you up. It was a taste that belonged to open skies and stolen time. Chocolate-covered orange peel was one of those Christmas treats that turned something ordinary into something extraordinary. Before stores sold candied citrus, families peeled oranges in long strips and simmered the rinds in sugar syrup until they softened and glowed. The house filled with the smell of citrus and warm syrup, and children poked at the pot hoping the pieces were ready. Once dried, the peels were dipped in melted chocolate, dark, or milk, depending on what the pantry allowed. The combination was unforgettable: bitter peel, bright orange flavor, and smooth chocolate. Families once set trays near cold windows to help the chocolate harden. The tradition faded as candy making became commercial, but this treat still carries the charm of quieter holidays when nothing went to waste. Nesselrode pudding brought Russian elegance to American Christmas tables during the Gilded Age. This frozen dessert combined chestnut puree with candied fruits, maraschino cherries, and whipped cream, all enriched with egg custard and a generous pour of maraschino liqueur. The mixture was frozen in decorative molds, then unmolded to reveal elaborate shapes that gleamed on silver platters. Named for a Russian diplomat, the pudding represented cosmopolitan sophistication that wealthy families aspired to display. The chestnut flavor was unlike anything else on the holiday table, earthy and sweet in equal measure. Making it required sourcing chestnuts, candying fruits, and mastering the temperamental frozen custard technique. Families served thin slices, the richness demanding restraint. The pudding disappeared as its ingredients became exotic and its preparation too demanding for modern schedules. Nesselrode pudding was Christmas elegance frozen into unforgettable form. We're going to go forward in time a bit, all the way to the beginning of what most people consider the late 20th century, where stuffed zucchini boats first started becoming something you would hear about regularly. At bars, from your friends and colleagues, or your partners. They became really hot in the 60s and 70s when it felt like everyday people were trying another dish from a new country that hadn't really touched base in America yet. It was the first time people expanded their taste buds beyond the bacon, pancake, and hash brown breakfasts they were mostly used to. Plus, stuffed zucchini boats were really healthy. They were a lot better to eat than those aforementioned breakfasts. The best part was that you could really change up the fillings, so depending on what you wanted, you could have fully vegetarian zucchini boats or ones with ground beef stuffings. People say this is a part of Italian-American cooking, but a lot of Mediterranean cooking makes use of dishes similar to zucchini boats, like using stuffed peppers and vegetables like eggplants. If we go back just a bit before the war and right towards the start and middle of the Depression, you'll find that chipped beef on toast was actually one of the most common things to eat, especially across working class and rural households. There were people who had their own farms and space to grow and raise their own cattle. They would often enjoy the best versions of these. Then the rest of the population would usually be working on much tougher and cheaper cuts of meat from unwanted parts of the animals, like the back or the shoulder. It meant that the quality of the meat was something you had to work around, typically by slow cooking it so you'd get some tenderness. Still, most people really just had bread to work with. The bread was also very prone to going stale, and the beef wasn't something you could use in decent or large amounts just because you were having a bad day. It was the Depression, Everyone was collectively having a bad day. Chipped beef on toast was an easy way for people to spice up their bread just a little while still being able to eat a decent breakfast. Honey walnut pralines were a Depression-era holdover that survived well into the mid-century because they were affordable, filling, and tasted far more extravagant than they cost. Honey simmered with sugar until it thickened, then walnuts were stirred in until each one was coated in a glossy amber shell. When spooned onto a tray to cool, they set into chewy clusters that smelled like warm nuts and sweetness. Families made them when times were tight, and even when things improved, the flavor was so comforting that people kept the tradition alive. Their sweetness was subtle, their texture a perfect blend of soft and crisp. Today, they rarely appear outside of old handwritten recipe cards, but older generations still smile when they remember how something so simple could taste so generous. Vinegar pie carried the tang of desperation transformed into something surprisingly delicious on Depression Christmas tables. When lemons were impossible to afford and fruit fillings remained a distant memory, families discovered that plain white vinegar could provide the tartness needed for a satisfying custard pie. The filling combined vinegar with sugar, eggs, butter, and flour, creating a custard that baked into something resembling lemon pie without the expense of citrus. The taste was sharp and sweet, with a silky texture that fooled many into thinking real fruit had been used. Mothers baked these pies in the same tins their grandmothers had used, continuing traditions even when ingredients changed. Children ate their slices without complaint, grateful for any dessert on the holiday table. The recipe required nothing beyond basic pantry staples, making it accessible to even the poorest households. Vinegar pie taught that substitution was not defeat, but creativity, proving Christmas dessert could survive any hardship. Corned beef hash sandwiches were the kind of meal that made you feel like you were sitting in a greasy spoon diner, even if you were just sitting at your grandparents' old wooden table. Corned beef hash had that unmistakable sizzle, that pan-fried aroma that filled the entire kitchen and made you feel hungry. Even if you had just eaten, grandparents would crisp it up just right, letting it brown at the edges and soften in the center until it tasted like something straight off a restaurant griddle. Then they would press it between slices of bread, flattening it slightly so the heat melted everything together in this satisfying, hearty way. The sandwich was salty, savory, warm, and deeply filling. It tasted like a blue-collar morning, the kind of breakfast you would grab before a long day of work. But when grandparents made it, it was more than fuel. It was a piece of their own memories, carried forward into yours. Corned beef hash sandwiches were cheap, simple, and unforgettable because they felt like a meal with history behind it. Every bite tasted like the countless mornings grandparents woke early, cooked quickly, and made sure everyone started the day full. They transformed canned or leftover hash into something that tasted miles above its humble ingredients. Chicken fried rice with canned chicken delivered a satisfying stir-fry that used pantry staples to create takeout flavor in record time. Day-old rice separated beautifully in a hot skillet coated with a thin film of oil, each grain absorbing the smoky heat. Diced onions, carrots, and peas added color and sweetness, sizzling as they released their fragrance. A can of cooked chicken provided tender meat with no extra prep, breaking apart into savory shreds that mingled with the vegetables. A quick splash of soy sauce and a sprinkle of garlic powder tied everything together, while scrambled eggs folded in at the end brought richness and body. The result was a meal that tasted carefully crafted yet came together in less than 15 minutes, perfect for evenings when energy ran low but appetites ran high. Families loved how it stretched a small amount of protein across several generous portions while clearing the fridge of leftover rice. Each spoonful offered the comfort of home and the excitement of a restaurant favorite, a reminder that great flavor does not require a long list of fresh ingredients when skill and heat meet simple planning. Chutney and cheddar sandwich delivered a bold contrast of sweet and sharp flavors by layering thick mango chutney beneath slices of tangy cheddar on crusty bread. The chutney provided a spiced fruitiness that paired beautifully with the deep bite of aged cheese, creating a combination that felt adventurous yet comforting. Mid-century home cooks embraced this sandwich, as imported chutney became more accessible through specialty markets and women's magazines promoted it as an elegant option for luncheons or cocktail hours. It needed no extra garnish and could be served warm or cold. Depending on the occasion, guests were always surprised by how well the bright chutney balanced the dense cheddar, transforming a simple sandwich into something exciting. Though it eventually faded as global flavors became commonplace, the chutney and cheddar sandwich remains a delicious relic of a time when a single exotic jar could elevate an everyday meal. Savory banana croquettes surprised picnic guests with a mix of gentle sweetness and light savory notes that turned a humble fruit into something remarkable. Ripe bananas were mashed with a pinch of salt and black pepper, then blended with fresh breadcrumbs and a spoonful of minced onion for a subtle bite. Small ovals were formed by hand, rolled in more crumbs, and fried in a shallow skillet until each croquette turned golden and crisp. The coating stayed delicately crunchy while the center remained soft and naturally sweet, a contrast that paired beautifully with roasted meats or a spoonful of spicy relish. Served warm on simple plates, these croquettes invited conversation as everyone tried to guess the unexpected ingredient hidden within. They proved that a common fruit could shine as a savory dish when seasoned with care, showing the creativity of church cooks who were never afraid to mix the familiar with the surprising to feed a joyful crowd. If you always believed that only the drippings can be used to make gravy, then you are wrong. Blood gravy was a Dust Bowl staple that created a meal from the most unappetizing of ingredients, animal blood. Sound intense? It was. But back then, farmers couldn't afford to waste a single drop, literally. Blood gravy was produced by drawing fresh blood from animals, particularly pigs or cows, and then mixing it with flour, milk, and spices to make it into a thick paste that was served as a relish. Served over biscuits or potatoes, it was rather tasty and rich in nutrients, which came as a complete shock. During a period when people suffered from a lack of iron, blood gravy was, in fact, a sort of multivitamin. This dish was both a product of ingenuity and the expenditure of a considerable amount of effort. Getting the blood was not easy, but the meal was filling. For today's food lovers, it may be hard to swallow, but blood-based recipes are not something new to the culinary world since there is blood pudding from Sweden and dinuguan from the Philippines. Would you try it? Seriously, I can take it if it's presented on a fluffy biscuit, and if it's well seasoned, I might be willing to try it. Dust Bowl cooks were masters of turning nothing into something, and blood gravy is a perfect example of that adage. Who says you need apples to make an apple pie? Not the Depression era, folks, that's for sure. This mock apple pie was a genius hack that used Ritz crackers as the crust and a sweet, sticky filling made from sugar, cinnamon, and water. It was a budget-friendly dessert that satisfied the sweet tooth without the need for expensive or hard-to-find ingredients. Plus, it was a great way to use up those stale crackers lurking in the back of your pantry. The Ritz mock apple pie became a Depression-era favorite, despite the fact that it was a pastry imposter. How did it work? The aromatic mixture of sugar, cinnamon, butter, lemon juice, and crackers combined to convince the taster's senses that the pie actually tasted of apples. Mock apple pie actually dates to the mid-1800s. During the wintertime, when apples were scarce and dried apple stores were used up, inventive home cooks would instead use soda crackers or stale bread. The more modern Ritz cracker version came about in the 1930s. We're going to go forward in time a bit, all the way to the beginning of what most people consider the late 20th century, where stuffed zucchini boats first started becoming something you would hear about regularly. At bars, from your friends and colleagues, or your partners. They became really hot in the 60s and 70s when it felt like everyday people were trying another dish from a new country that hadn't really touched base in America yet. It was the first time people expanded their taste buds beyond the bacon, pancake, and hash brown breakfasts they were mostly used to. Plus, stuffed zucchini boats were really healthy. They were a lot better to eat than those aforementioned breakfasts. The best part was that you could really change up the fillings, so depending on what you wanted, you could have fully vegetarian zucchini boats or ones with ground beef stuffings. People say this is a part of Italian-American cooking, but a lot of Mediterranean cooking makes use of dishes similar to zucchini boats, like using stuffed peppers and vegetables like eggplants. Are you a big fan of deli food? Deli meats, sandwiches, loaves, that kind of thing? Then one of the best parts of that kind of eating was the olive loaf. It was usually made with pork and beef plus chopped green olives, which is what it became known for. There was a small, brief period before convenience foods started taking over America, where processed meats were really becoming a thing, and this dish was a big part of that time, which arguably spanned all over the 1940s to the 1970s. It had an extremely loyal fan base too, as this was responsible for many deli counters still staying in business. These days, you could find retro stalls that still do a mean olive load, but the days where this was a commonplace item on the street and something you'd see your grandma cooking up are long gone in America's history. People definitely remember the flavors of the bologna, the ham loaves, and all the amazing dips they came with, though. Since this is the decade of casseroles, it would be pretty disrespectful if we didn't talk about one of the most influential ones ever. Savory bread pudding was a casserole entirely made out of eggs, milk, cream, and bread. You might be thinking how something like this could ever be called a casserole, since it sounds like downright blasphemy, but hold your horses. It was a typical 1960s meal in lots of places, specifically rural ones. If you ever had a bad case of stale bread and leftover milk and cream, or if you just wanted a nice dessert with a comforting consistency, then you'd definitely go for this. Some savory bread puddings also included meats like ham, bacon, and sausages, though it was mostly just sausages since they were the most popular thing to add in this decade. The draw of this dish would be how it had a crispy exterior, but a very soft, almost porridge-like core that would make digging into it a delight for your senses. Some people would go the vegan route and add all kinds of vegetables like green onions and spinach. Even green peas were popular. You'd combine all of these and bake the bread, and the end result was something that grandmothers in particular loved making for their doting grandkids. Chocolate-covered potato chips were a sweet and salty secret tradition in many Midwest homes. Before snack companies copied the idea, families dipped sturdy potato chips into melted chocolate right in their own kitchens. The hardest part was choosing chips thick enough to survive the dip. Someone melted chocolate on the stove, while others sorted through the pile, picking the best ones. The mix of salty crunch and sweet chocolate was addictive and felt almost mischievous. These treats appeared at Christmas parties when families wanted something fun and unexpected. They were quick, imperfect, and made with laughter. Over time, companies sold their own versions, but the homemade ones had a charm machines could not mimic. They tasted like joy with a hint of rebellion. Prune cake brought dense, moist sweetness to Christmas tables when other fruits were too expensive. Dried prunes were affordable, shelf-stable, and available year-round at general stores, making them reliable for families who could not afford fresh fruit or canned goods. The batter was enriched with stewed prunes chopped and folded throughout, along with spices like cinnamon, allspice, and nutmeg that transformed simple ingredients into something festive. Baked in cast-iron pans, the cake emerged dark, fragrant, and moist in ways other Depression-era cakes rarely achieved. The prunes kept it from drying out, allowing it to be made ahead for Christmas Day. Some families added powdered sugar dustings while others served slices plain, letting fruit and spices speak for themselves. Prune cake was practical rather than glamorous, but it delivered real satisfaction to families who had learned that survival and celebration could coexist, each slice proving modest ingredients could still create holiday memories. Potato salad sandwiches were the kind of meal that made perfect sense to grandparents, even if they surprise people now. Leftover potato salad never went to waste. It became a cool, creamy filling tucked between slices of bread, turning into something far richer than the cost behind it. The soft potatoes, the dressing, the crunch of onions or celery all blended into a hearty mixture that felt surprisingly complete. It tasted like a picnic you could hold in your hand, like summer afternoons and easy, familiar gatherings. Grandparents understood how to stretch food, and potato salad was one of those dishes that could go further than anyone expected. The sandwich was inexpensive, satisfying, and comforting in that quiet way their meals always were. They had a talent for turning yesterday's leftovers into something worth remembering, and this sandwich was one of their simplest successes. Spinach and egg sandwich combined earthy greens with satisfying protein by mixing chopped cooked spinach and diced hard-boiled eggs in a mustard dressing that tied everything together. This nourishing blend offered a mellow bite with a subtle tang, perfect for quick lunches or light suppers. Families embraced it during the rationing years when eggs and garden spinach were affordable staples that delivered essential nutrients without great cost. The sandwich traveled well wrapped in wax paper and remained tasty at room temperature, making it ideal for workers and school children alike. A touch of black pepper or grated onion could be added for extra zest, but many preferred the pure, straightforward flavors that defined home cooking of the 1940s. though modern cafes rarely feature it. The spinach and egg sandwich reflects an era when simple, wholesome ingredients came together to create meals that were as practical as they were flavorful, offering a lesson in timeless kitchen economy. Buttermilk and cornflake smoothie surprised everyone with its creamy tang and subtle crunch, a quick breakfast drink that traveled easily to an early morning picnic. Tangy buttermilk was poured into a tall glass blender with a drizzle of honey, a pinch of nutmeg, and a handful of crisp cornflakes. As the blade spun, the cereal softened slightly, yet left tiny flecks that gave each sip a playful texture. Some cooks added ripe banana or a splash of vanilla for extra body, while others kept it plain to let the buttermilk shine. Served in chilled mason jars, the smoothie offered a nourishing start that felt like a cross between a milkshake and a classic Southern cereal bowl. Children delighted in the gentle sweetness and the faint crunch that lingered after every gulp. It was a clever way to stretch pantry staples and make something special when time was short and the churchyard was already filling with song. What's for dinner? Oh, just a small something that came in from the backyard. Yes, the tumbleweed casserole was a real dish during the Dust Bowl, which just goes to show you that when the going gets tough, the tough make casseroles out of tumbleweeds. Tumbleweeds, those rolling shrubs of the Wild West screen, are actually technically, or at least partially, edible. Not fancy for the tongue, but we are hungry to the bone. Let's give it a try, edible. The process began with the boiling of the tumbleweed leaves to reduce their coarse feel and also to reduce the bitterness of the leaves. Then they'd get layered with whatever ingredients were available, maybe some scraps of meat, potatoes, or canned goods if you were lucky. The result? A surprisingly substantial, earthy-flavored casserole that was as much about sustenance as it was about taste. Tumbleweed is very fibrous and even has a few vitamins in it, so it wasn't the worst thing to eat when fresh greens were scarce. Moreover, tumbleweeds were free and easy to come by, nature's grocery store if you will. Though you'll never see it on the dinner table. Tumbleweed casserole represents Dust Bowl endurance. Would I eat it? Well, I'd need a serious pep talk and a lot of seasoning. But hey, if the tumbleweed can take the hot winds, then it should not be a problem on my plate. Brown Betties were one of the most classic American desserts to ever grace the table of an American kid. Something that might be seen as an old-fashioned dessert now, but used to be the next best thing after an apple pie. The flavors of a Brown Betty usually come from the spiced apples and other fruit-layered dishes, which are really buttery. The sugary breadcrumbs on top give it a crunch, which really adds to the entire vibe of the Brown Betty. You're looking for a warm, comforting dish that gets you in a nostalgic mood. Something you can sit down with and enjoy bite for bite, not rush through. It's an experience that you want to savor, like an empty, windy street as you walk down by and enjoy it. The Brown Betty was definitely something that would get you up out into the street, whether you were going to visit your grandma's for an authentic pie or a nearby bakery to reminisce about childhood days. The earliest recipes you can find are the ones from 1866, but those are more like apple betties than the ones we're talking about. Either way, this dish has definitely evolved alongside the population, and those who grew up with it will remember it fondly. Meat turnovers in the 1960s were a really common choice of snack during the 1960s, and this is actually something we entirely have fast food culture and industrialization to thank for. The 1960s was a time when companies were slowly realizing the sheer goldmine that is convenience food. Canned food was just the start, the gateway drug, if you would. The next step would be to go on over to frozen foods, which is exactly where you would find most of the stuff for a meat turnover anyway. The rise of frozen beef, pork, chicken, and sausages, all of it meant that you could now have ease of access to meat dishes like literally never before. The best fillings throughout most homes were things like beef stew fillings or lots of diced sausages, often drenched in a spicy gravy or cheese mix. Beef turnovers were some of the nicest ones to come out of it, really. You would wrap all these frozen meats into one flaky pastry, and that was that. There were all kinds of options for it, too. You could get Stauffer's, Banquet, and Callender's, all of which even started pulling out their own frozen turnovers. It was a cash cow, one after the next, and no company was not taking advantage of it. Maple cream candies were the kind of Christmas treat that felt almost too delicate to touch, the sort of candy you picked up with 2 fingers because you were afraid of ruining its perfect little shape. Back when holiday molds were pulled out only once a year, families would make batch after batch of these maple-scented treasures, pouring warm maple cream into tiny molds shaped like angels, bells, trees, or snowflakes. There was nothing artificial about them, nothing rushed or store-bought. Just pure maple syrup cooked slowly with butter and a little cream until it thickened enough to take form. Older cooks knew exactly when to remove the pot from the heat because the scent changed slightly and the bubbles grew heavier. Children would hover close by, praying aloud that someone would let them scrape the sides of the pot once the molds were filled. When the candies cooled, they popped out smooth and pale, each one melting the moment it touched your tongue. The taste was rich but somehow light, like maple sugar dissolved into snow. These candies were often packed into little tins and given to teachers, neighbors, or grandparents, each tin tied with ribbon and smelling faintly like winter cabins and warm kitchens. People do not make maple cream candies as often today because real maple syrup is expensive and patience is in shorter supply than ever. But older generations still talk about them as the candy that made Christmas feel elegant, homemade, and full of intention. They were the kind of treat that asked you to slow down, breathe in the moment, and savor a sweetness that came entirely from nature. They tasted like the quiet side of Christmas, the part that lived in small traditions and thoughtful hands. Molasses cookies were the sweet tradition that survived when sugar became too expensive for Christmas baking. Blackstrap molasses cost less than refined sugar and was available at every country store, giving these cookies their dark color and robust flavor. The dough was mixed by hand in wooden bowls, combining flour, lard, or bacon drippings, eggs, and generous molasses until it formed a sticky, fragrant mass. Ginger, cinnamon, and cloves were added when available, transforming simple ingredients into something that tasted like the holidays. Cookies baked on greased pans until edges crisped and centers stayed soft, filling kitchens with spiced aroma children would remember for decades. Mothers made batches large enough to share with neighbors and to leave out for relatives. The dark sweetness hit the tongue differently than sugar, deeper, almost earthy, with mineral notes that tasted like comfort. Molasses cookies proved Christmas could still taste special, even when pennies stretched impossibly far. Fried potatoes on bread were the kind of sandwich that made you feel like you had stumbled into a diner, even when you were sitting at your grandparents' kitchen table. Potatoes were one of the most reliable foods around, cheap, filling, and always ready to become something comforting. Grandparents would slice them thin or cube them small, fry them in a pan until they were crisp on the outside and soft on the inside, and then pile them between slices of warm bread. Sometimes they added a little salt, sometimes a little pepper, and sometimes whatever leftover fat they had in the pan to give it that extra restaurant flair. It was simple, but it ate like a full meal. The sandwich was heavy in the best way, warm, golden, and satisfying from the first bite to the last. You could hear the potatoes sizzling long before you sat down, and that sound alone told you that something good was coming your way. This was the kind of food that filled your stomach and your memory at the same time. It tasted like early mornings, like long afternoons, like comfort without cost. Grandparents understood that potatoes could be transformed into a dozen different meals, but this one always felt special. It had that diner-style nostalgia, that roadside cafe charm, even though it was made with nothing but potatoes, bread, and a little bit of time. Fried potato sandwiches were cheap, sure, but they carried a kind of richness you could not put a price on. Country ham and red-eye gravy brought a bold, salty kick to the end of a long day, drawing on traditions that went back generations. Thin slices of country ham hit a hot skillet and sizzled until their edges crisped and their smoky scent filled the kitchen. Once the meat was removed, strong black coffee was poured into the pan to deglaze the savory bits, blending with a splash of water and a touch of butter to create the dark, rich gravy that gave the dish its name. The result was a sauce both bitter and savory, perfect for spooning over the ham or soaking into warm biscuits. In less than 15 minutes, the table held a meal that tasted slow, cooked, and soulful. Working families appreciated the speed while still honoring a Southern classic, and the sharp aroma of coffee and ham became a sign that dinner was ready. Each bite balanced salt, smoke, and a subtle bitterness, a reminder of farmhouse suppers where nothing was wasted and flavor came from skill and tradition rather than expensive ingredients. Maple-flavored sweet potato cakes filled the air with the scent of warm syrup and earthy roots. Instant mashed sweet potatoes were combined with a splash of milk, a dusting of cinnamon, and a drizzle of maple flavoring to form a smooth batter. Small scoops of this mixture were dropped onto a hot griddle and flattened gently with the back of a spoon. Within minutes, the cakes developed a golden crust while remaining tender inside. A quick brush of melted butter and a second drizzle of maple syrup created a glistening glaze that caught the afternoon sunlight. These cakes were hearty enough to serve as a main dish or as a sweet side alongside fried chicken and collard greens. Children loved their pancake-like texture, and adults appreciated how fast and affordable they were to make. They proved that even instant ingredients could become something special when guided by skilled hands and a desire to nourish a community gathered in faith and fellowship beneath the wide blue sky of a summer afternoon. Yes, you heard it here first, Skunk Stew. Even when the Dust Bowl left dinner plates empty, people were not the only ones who could not escape being eaten, not even skunks. Now, before you start gagging, let me explain. Skunks were not the preferred source of protein, but when the resources were scarce, the farmers made do with whatever they could hunt down. Cooking skunk stew was not for the faint-hearted. First, you had to, de-skunk the skunk. It was mandatory to have the scent glands removed unless one wanted the house cleared faster than a tornado. After washing, it was cooked with what vegetables and spices were available. The result? A rather soft and gamey meal that was palatable though, but not one that would make me eagerly look forward to the next meal. Skunks may sound like the butt of some jokes, but these animals were a good source of protein food when all else was scarce. And can you imagine? A skunk was not as smelly as other wild games like raccoon or possum? Talk about a backhanded compliment. While skunk stew appears to be the epitome of the challenge-accepted food that is popular today for the survivors of the Dust Bowl, it was a symbol of survival. They made desperation into dinner. As they say, where there is life, there is a chance to live, and sometimes to live, you have to eat the wild, literally. Are you a big fan of deli food? Deli meats, sandwiches, loaves, that kind of thing? Then one of the best parts of that kind of eating was the olive loaf. It was usually made with pork and beef plus chopped green olives, which is what it became known for. There was a small, brief period before convenience foods started taking over America, where processed meats were really becoming a thing, and this dish was a big part of that time, which arguably spanned all over the 1940s to the 1970s. It had an extremely loyal fan base too, as this was responsible for many deli counters still staying in business. These days, you could find retro stalls that still do a mean olive load, but the days where this was a commonplace item on the street and something you'd see your grandma cooking up are long gone in America's history. People definitely remember the flavors of the bologna, the ham loaves, and all the amazing dips they came with, though. We've taken a lot from our European neighbors over the years. Cabbage rolls were just another thing that we adopted from places far beyond American soil or shores. Once you try them, they're actually significantly better than most people give them credit for. Cabbage rolls used to be known by all kinds of names in different countries. It was typical to make it with a combination of beef and pork, and then mix in buckwheat or rice. People also put in fresh mushrooms or some fruits, and you might be thinking, okay, but where's the cabbage roll part? All of this was centered around the cabbage. You wouldn't get big, generous servings of all these sides. They were just there in the roll to make the cabbage better and to fill out the meal a bit more. Think of it like a taco, you know? The cabbage roll was a big part of the World War II era diet that most people had grown accustomed to, and that's maybe why some people nostalgically still ate this. Chocolate-dipped marshmallows were one of the easiest candies to make, but somehow they still managed to feel like luxury during the holidays. Back then, families made marshmallows at home, cutting soft squares from a powdered pan and coating their fingertips in sugar. Once dipped in warm melted chocolate, they cooled into glossy treats that tasted far richer than anything from a bag. Children hovered nearby waiting for permission to eat the ones that were not pretty enough for the Christmas plate. Every bite was soft, melty, and full of winter sweetness. Modern store-bought marshmallows dip just fine, but they cannot compete with the charm of the homemade squares that wobbled when you picked them up. They were simple, festive, and perfect, which is exactly why so many people wish they still appeared on today's holiday tables. Stuffed cabbage rolls appeared on Christmas tables across immigrant communities, stretching small amounts of meat into dishes that fed entire families. The technique came from Eastern European traditions, adapted to Depression realities where ground meat was a luxury used sparingly. Cabbage leaves were blanched until pliable, then wrapped around filling of rice, onion, and whatever meat scraps the family could afford. Sometimes just tablespoons stretched through an entire batch. The rolls simmered for hours in tomato sauce, the long cooking tenderizing everything and melding flavors together. By Christmas dinner, each roll became a complete package of protein, grain, and vegetable. The aroma of simmering cabbage and tomatoes filled homes, announcing to neighbors that holiday meal was being prepared. Stuffed cabbage taught the art of stretching resources without sacrificing satisfaction, connecting families to heritage while solving the problem of feeding many mouths with little money. Potted meat sandwiches were born from pantry shelves that never had much but always had enough. That small can of potted meat, easy to overlook today, was once a dependable meal when money had to stretch farther than anyone wanted to admit. Grandparents mixed it with diced onions or pickles to give it flavor that felt almost gourmet. Spread thick on soft bread, it became the kind of sandwich you relied on when time or money were running low. Potted meat had this salty, savory richness that tasted like a diner sandwich when seasoned just right. Grandparents knew how to make a can feel like a full meal, how to make you feel like nothing was missing, even if life was difficult. Eating it felt like stepping back into a kitchen built on hope and habit. They opened the can, mixed it by instinct, and served it without fuss. That simplicity was part of its charm. Potted meat sandwiches were built on resilience, care, and the belief that flavor does not depend on wealth. Cornmeal. Crusted catfish fillets brought the taste of a southern fish fry to the table in minutes, turning thin fillets into golden perfection. A simple dredge of cornmeal seasoned with salt, pepper, and a hint of cayenne coated the fish, while oil heated in a cast-iron skillet. As soon as the fillets touched the pan, they sizzled and released a savory aroma that promised a feast. In only a few minutes, each side crisped to a deep golden brown, while the flesh stayed tender and flaky. Remember those working man's dinners you could make in just 10 minutes after a long day on the line? These dinners filled mid-century kitchens with quick heat, heavy plates, and the smell of hard work turning into comfort. What did those rushed but satisfying nights give us that slower meals never could? Peanut butter and lettuce sandwich surprised first-time tasters with its mix of creamy richness and crisp freshness. Smooth peanut butter spread thick across soft bread formed a savory base, while cool iceberg lettuce leaves added crunch and a faint grassy sweetness. The combination offered a pleasing contrast of textures that turned an ordinary pantry staple into something special. Families embraced it during the 1930s and 40s for its affordability and nutrition, since peanut butter supplied protein and lettuce brought vitamins. Without costing much, it was a popular school lunch because it traveled well and stayed fresh even on warm days. Some cooks drizzled a little honey or sprinkled salt for extra flavor, but many insisted the pure pairing was best remembered as a Depression-era innovation. The peanut butter and lettuce sandwich remains a clever example of how American home cooks turned limited resources into meals that were both practical and unexpectedly delightful to eat. Chocolate potato candy fascinated guests who could not believe that mashed potatoes could hide inside such a decadent sweet. Leftover potatoes were mashed smooth and combined with cocoa powder, butter, and powdered sugar to form a pliable dough that was rolled into logs or pressed into small squares. The mixture set quickly and sliced clean, revealing a rich chocolate flavor with a subtle earthy depth. Some cooks added chopped nuts or coconut for extra texture, while others drizzled a thin glaze of melted chocolate to create a glossy finish. This candy required no baking and made use of ingredients already in most kitchens, proving that a touch of imagination could turn everyday staples into a treat fit for a celebration. Children were delighted by the story behind it, and adults enjoyed the surprising moistness that kept each bite tender even in the summer sun. It became a treasured recipe to share among friends, a reminder that thrift and creativity often lead to the most memorable flavors on a crowded picnic table. I don't need to tell you about how much America and the West in general love rice pudding. It's been something that's helped rural and urban populations get through some disastrously tough times, as well as a warm memory from childhood for a lot of people. One variation of the classic rice pudding was a Swedish rice ring, which would mostly be served at Christmas or a family get-together, but it eventually extended into daily use too. The dish first started off as something you'd only find in Scandinavian communities, and they'd really make heaps of the stuff. Enough to go around a big family of 6 or 8 with a bowl for each, and it makes sense too since it was made using some pretty average ingredients. Stuff like rice, milk, and cream were all you needed to get a Swedish rice ring going. The way it differed from normal rice pudding is in how the dish was originally always made with some kind of spice and topped with fruit or served alongside jam. Later on, when it expanded past the Scandinavian locale and got adopted into widespread use, people started using nutmeg and cinnamon as well. Some scant cookbooks might still recall the dish and the times where it was a great comfort meal, but a lot of the new ones don't really remember it anymore. Mock chicken legs were a result of mock culture, which was pretty much another Depression-era special. The whole idea was to mimic the most popular foods that people used to make with what used to be their everyday staples in the pantries. That stuff wasn't becoming available anytime soon, so people decided to mimic those flavors and textures with what they had. Luckily, some of these stuck to the wall a lot better than others, mock chicken legs being one of them. They were kind of popular throughout the 1960s, not too much, but not so little that you could completely write them off. They were affordable, and hey, the vegans loved it. Besides that, people thought they could probably do with a little less meat in their diet anyway. Just look at this list. How many meat-heavy options could you spot? I mean, neither you nor I are doctors, but I think you'd agree with me that maybe we have a track record of overdoing it? This country is full of meatheads after all, and they caused a ruckus back then over this too. People were complaining about it being fake meat and having all kinds of nasty additives that would give you stage 3 colon cancer or something. It was really just textured vegetable protein though, and these were substitutes for meat that were specifically designed to appeal to a vegetarian crowd. Plus, they were stupidly cheap. It helped when you couldn't afford regular meat, even if you were a vegan. Rum balls rolled in cocoa were the kind of Christmas candy that adults claimed were for the grown folks, even though every child tried sneaking one when no one was looking. They were made from crushed vanilla wafers, cocoa, nuts if you had them, and whatever holiday flavoring the family kept tucked away for special occasions. The mixture turned into a soft dough that stuck to your palms, and shaping it into little balls was half the fun. Rolling them in cocoa made them look fancier than they really were, and families kept them stored in tins that rattled every time someone lifted the lid to just check. Their flavor deepened as they sat, turning richer and stronger with every passing day until Christmas morning finally arrived. No one makes them much anymore because store-bought candies drowned out homemade traditions, but for older generations, rum balls still taste like grown-up Christmas in a single bite. Rice pudding with raisins turned leftover rice into Christmas dessert that felt far more special than ingredients suggested. When rice remained from previous meals, thrifty cooks transformed it by baking slowly with milk, eggs, sugar, and precious raisins saved for holiday baking. The pudding emerged from the oven golden and creamy, with plump raisins scattered throughout like treasure. Cinnamon and nutmeg added warmth that made the simple dish taste festive. Families served it warm or cold, sometimes with cream for those who could afford it. Children loved the sweetness and surprise of finding raisins in each bite, never realizing they were eating kitchen economy. The dish required no special equipment, just a baking dish and patience for slow cooking. Rice pudding represented the creative bridge between everyday leftovers and holiday celebration, proving that Christmas dessert did not require expensive ingredients, only knowledge of how to transform simple things into something worth remembering. Tomato and mayonnaise sandwiches were the kind of simple perfection that could only come from grandparents who understood the power of fresh ingredients and soft white bread. A late summer tomato, sliced thick and dripping with juice, could transform the most ordinary day into something memorable. Grandparents knew how to pick them, pressing gently to feel for that perfect softness that meant the tomato had lived its best life. Then came the mayonnaise, spread edge to edge with a focus that would make a professional chef blush. The first bite was always messy in the best way, juices mixing with mayonnaise until it tasted like something from a restaurant that bragged about farm-fresh produce. It was cheap, but never felt cheap. These sandwiches were like a quiet family secret, something learned only by standing in a warm kitchen while a grandparent sliced tomatoes with the same knife they had used for years. Eating it felt like eating a season, tied to gardens, porch swings, and long afternoons. Joy made from bread, tomato, and mayonnaise. Grandparents never explained it. They just handed it to you, knowing it was unforgettable. Minute steak with onion gravy delivered the taste of a slow Sunday supper in a fraction of the time. Ultra-thin beef steaks hit a hot skillet and browned within moments, releasing a rich aroma as they seared. After the meat was set aside, sliced onions cooked in the drippings until they softened and turned sweet. Then a splash of beef broth and a dusting of flour transformed the pan juices into a smooth, savory gravy. The steaks returned to the pan for a brief simmer, soaking up the onion-infused sauce. Served with buttered toast or a mound of mashed potatoes, the dish tasted like comfort that had taken all afternoon, even though it was ready in less than 20 minutes. Families appreciated its hearty flavor and quick cleanup, while the fragrant gravy made the kitchen smell welcoming and warm. Each forkful combined tender beef and silky onions, a reminder that a satisfying meal does not require hours of preparation when technique and simple ingredients come together perfectly. Walnut and cream cheese sandwich turned the hearty flavor of toasted nuts into a satisfying spread by folding them into whipped cream cheese until the texture became both rich and slightly crunchy. A drizzle of honey was sometimes added for a hint of sweetness, but the main appeal was the deep, nutty taste paired with smooth, tangy cheese. This sandwich gained popularity in the 1930s and 40s, when walnuts were inexpensive and widely available through local farms and victory gardens. It became a staple of afternoon teas and church socials where hosts sought recipes that were both frugal and impressive. The combination provided protein and healthy fats, which made it as nourishing as it was tasty, served on brown bread or whole wheat. It offered a rustic contrast to the refined tea sandwiches of the era. Though modern menus rarely feature it, the walnut and cream cheese sandwich remains a charming example of simple ingredients delivering a memorable and wholesome lunch. Horseradish gelatin squares provided a bold finish that sparked conversation long after the last hymn. Lemon gelatin was prepared according to package directions, then blended with finely grated horseradish and a touch of vinegar while still warm. The mixture was poured into a shallow pan and chilled until firm, then cut into tidy squares that shimmered like amber glass. The first bite delivered a sweet citrus start, followed by a sudden rush of heat that cleared the sinuses and surprised unsuspecting guests. Often served alongside cold meats or seafood salads, these squares balanced richness with an invigorating kick. They traveled well in coolers and remained firm even on hot days, making them practical for outdoor gatherings. Some churchgoers approached them with caution, but quickly grew fond of their lively flavor, appreciating how they awakened the palate after a table filled with hearty fare. This dish showcased the adventurous spirit of 1960s church cooks who were never afraid to experiment and bring a spark of excitement to traditional picnic spreads. Brown Betties were one of the most classic American desserts to ever grace the table of an American kid. Something that might be seen as an old-fashioned dessert now, but used to be the next best thing after an apple pie. The flavors of a Brown Betty usually come from the spiced apples and other fruit-layered dishes, which are really buttery. The sugary breadcrumbs on top give it a crunch, which really adds to the entire vibe of the Brown Betty. You're looking for a warm, comforting dish that gets you in a nostalgic mood. Something you can sit down with and enjoy bite for bite, not rush through. It's an experience that you want to savor, like an empty, windy street as you walk down by and enjoy it. The Brown Betty was definitely something that would get you up out into the street, whether you were going to visit your grandma's for an authentic pie or a nearby bakery to reminisce about childhood days. The earliest recipes you can find are the ones from 1866, but those are more like Apple Bettys than the ones we're talking about. Either way, this dish has definitely evolved alongside the population, and those who grew up with it will remember it fondly. Pickle roll-ups, on the other hand, were a wonderful party-time snack that became the star of two types of gatherings: cocktail parties and potlucks. See, in potlucks, it was really common for people to bring one of everything and just have a lot to eat for the family, but cocktail parties were an entirely different kind of beast. The post-World War II era in America was a strange one. It saw lots of cultural shifts and new trends that people couldn't have ever guessed would make some serious headway into the mainstream. Despite that, these parties that were pretty much just wine-tasting parties but with cocktails turned into little competitive nights where people would compare their finger foods and the host would try their damnedest to pick a menu that suits everyone's tastes. By the end of it, no one would really even get drunk. What they would get, though, is pretty tipsy. And you must not be a stranger to the need for snacking that arises when the drinks start hitting. Casual gatherings that were cocktail parties also saw a lot of use for pickle roll-ups, and as far as snacks went, this was a pretty good option for hosts who couldn't spend a lot of time doing prep work. Popcorn balls with molasses syrup were the sticky, unforgettable treats that defined Christmas in homes where money was tight but joy was strong. Fresh popcorn filled the biggest bowl in the kitchen, and molasses syrup simmered until it smelled deep and warm. Adults poured the hot syrup over the popcorn and stirred with wooden spoons. Once it cooled slightly, everyone buttered their hands and shaped the mixture into balls, laughing at the mess. Some came out round, others lopsided, but all tasted like comfort. Wrapped in wax paper, they were given to neighbors or packed for school. Popcorn balls disappeared over time because molasses lost popularity, but anyone who remembers them knows how special they were. They tasted like togetherness you could hold in your hands. Sardine and onion sandwich offered a bold oceanic flavor that thrived during an era when tinned fish was an affordable source of protein. Families opened small cans of sardines packed in oil and layered them over slices of hearty brown bread, adding thin rounds of raw onion for a pungent bite. Coastal communities embraced this sandwich for its convenience, while inland households appreciated the long shelf life of preserved fish. The natural oils soaked into the bread, creating a rich texture that required no additional spread. Fishermen often carried it as a portable meal that could withstand long hours at sea, while factory workers found it a quick and sustaining lunch. Despite its strong aroma, it became a beloved staple in many immigrant neighborhoods where similar flavors were common. The pairing of briny fish and sharp onion may seem intense today, but it represents the straightforward, hearty meals that once defined American working-class kitchens. Butter and sugar sandwiches were the quiet little treat that felt like a celebration even when there was nothing special going on. Grandparents would take soft white bread, spread a generous layer of butter across it, and sprinkle just enough sugar to make it sparkle. Toast it lightly, and suddenly you had something that tasted like pastry from a bakery window. The butter melted into every corner of the bread, and the sugar turned into this delicate crunch that made the whole thing feel indulgent, despite being made from the simplest ingredients in the kitchen. It was sweet, without trying too hard, comforting without being heavy, and somehow tasted like more than the sum of its parts. When grandparents handed it to you warm, you felt like you were being given a secret treasure, one of those homemade miracles that adults forget about but kids remember forever. It was cheap, but it never tasted cheap. The flavor made you feel like you were eating dessert, even though it was technically just bread, butter, and sugar. Maybe that is why it stuck with so many people. It was the taste of being young, of having someone take the time to make you something small but meaningful. Butter and sugar sandwiches were proof that the simplest foods could make the biggest memories, and that a tiny bit of sweetness could carry you a long way. Molasses ham biscuit sandwiches were the cowboys' version of Sunday best. Cold slices of salted ham, usually left over from the previous night's big meal, were layered on fresh biscuits and slathered with a thick smear of dark molasses. It was sweet, salty, and messy enough to stain your fingers and your shirt. The molasses was strong, sometimes bitter, sometimes syrupy, but always bold enough to cut through the cured meat. On the trail or at the ranch, this sandwich felt like a reward, like someone had remembered you liked good food. Biscuits were made fresh when supplies allowed, often with lard and love, and that flaky texture paired with the slick of ham fat made this a rare treat. Cowboys carried it wrapped in cloth, eating it cold under trees or stars. It was one of the few meals that felt like a story, of home, of family, of something more than work and dust. For a few bites, the world softened. American-type goulash became a comfort food that was known for so many things that made your life easy. Simplicity, typically, was what people wanted during this time. Think about it. Work culture has only gotten worse in our generation. You come home clocking that 9-to-5 shift? What's the first thing that goes in your head? Maybe hop in the kitchen, thaw some chicken, and dirty your hands with some spices and grease? Come on, dude, no. You want to catch up on some Z's. Take a power nap. Get some of your pep back, you know? American goulash was such a good dish exactly because it let you do all of these things while still having a full stomach. In some places, you'd call it chop suey, but really, depending on the region you were in, you would see something entirely different. Some people had the whole thing consisting of this rich tomato sauce with diced and boiled tomatoes to go with it. Others really thought you couldn't make it work without a big focus on ground beef. This was the most popular option since, out of everything, ground beef being the center of the dish made it both affordable and familiar. Then, some people also really liked elbow macaroni. It was a pretty common sight to see in American goulash. The dish tasted very homely, and you could feed a family of 5 or more with one batch. Hoppin' John is a dish that has some pretty rich heritage. I'm talking about African, Caribbean, and Native American roots that all boil together in the melting pot known as the South, where it first started becoming really trendy. However, the origins of the dish are actually a bit darker than just a happy coincidence that somehow got into everyone's table. Though the people who were eating it happily wouldn't know, it was first created and brought over by enslaved Africans in the American South. It made use of African rice and pork, and yes, the best part of the dish were the black-eyed peas even in those times. Now, as far as the name Hoppin' John is considered, nobody really ever knew where it first came from, or if there was a John who made this dish and brought it into everyone's lives, but the first time this name was mentioned was in the 1840s in a print. If you were down in the South in African American communities during New Year, then you would especially see a lot of Hoppin' Johns everywhere. The aroma of those peas and the smoked pork wouldn't miss anyone's nose, as the scent carried for miles and miles away. It was eaten specifically on New Year's because it was a common belief that eating Hoppin' Johns would bring good luck to people if they ate it to start the year. If you went into any new year with such a good plate of food, I'd say your luck was already pretty good. So maybe it does work? Now, the macaroni mass movement has also spread to other dishes and facets of American culture, like our dear old chili. Chili with pasta is something you'd see all over the 20th century, but the chili macaroni fusion had not happened properly until the middle of the 20th century. It was actually thanks to all the economic struggle that was going on at the time that people decided to work with a dish that could be adapted with macaroni like this. Since macaroni itself was extremely filling but not too strong in the taste department, and since chili had nothing to offer you but flavor and wasn't really that filling, the mix was obvious. Both the dishes had a mutually beneficial relationship to gain from working with each other, and Americans are nothing if not people who have a keen nose for opportunity, especially with food. Thanks to that, the Chili Mac combo became a massive hit throughout working-class homes across the United States. This was seen as a wonderful one-dish meal that could tend to almost every need you had while still being superbly easy to make. Spiced rock candy on strings was one of the most magical Christmas crafts older generations remembered, because the candy literally grew before your eyes. It began with a jar of sugar syrup flavored with cinnamon, clove, or peppermint, heated until the sugar dissolved completely. A piece of string was tied around a pencil or a stick, lowered into the jar, and left in a warm corner of the kitchen. Over the next few days, crystals formed along the string, growing bigger each morning like tiny sugar icicles. Children would run to check the jars the moment they woke up, amazed that candy could appear from nothing but patience and science. Once the crystals reached the right size, the strings were pulled from the jars and left to dry, sparkling like Christmas decorations. Rock candy was a simple treat, affordable and exciting, especially in homes where store-bought candy was rare. Spiced versions were a holiday favorite because they filled the jar with warmth and fragrance long before the candy was ready. People stopped making rock candy as kitchens grew busier, but those who remember it still smile at the memory of growing their own sweets. It tasted like childhood curiosity and Christmas wonder suspended on a string. Ham bone soup stretched a single Christmas ham into weeks of nourishment for families who could barely afford meat. When a family managed to purchase or barter for a ham during the holidays, nothing was discarded. The bone became foundation for soup that could feed everyone multiple times. The bone simmered for hours in large iron pots, releasing rich marrow and smoky flavor into broth, while dried beans softened alongside it. Root vegetables from the cellar, carrots, turnips, potatoes, joined the pot, creating a meal both hearty and affordable. Every bit of meat clinging to the bone was carefully scraped and returned to the soup. Families ladled steaming bowls of this broth throughout the week following Christmas, each serving a reminder of the holiday meal. Ham bone soup represented practical magic of Depression-era cooking, where one purchase became many meals. It was more than sustenance. It bridged holiday celebration and ordinary survival for families counting every penny. Ham salad sandwiches were the kind of thrift brilliance grandparents mastered without ever bragging about it. They would take leftover ham, chop it with practiced ease, and mix it with mayonnaise, relish, and a touch of mustard until it became a creamy, tangy blend that tasted like something from a small-town deli. Spread thick on soft bread, it felt like a proper lunch even though it came from scraps and habit. The smell of ham and relish filling the kitchen was enough to make anyone hungry, and the taste was always rich but never heavy, balanced even without a written recipe. Grandparents simply knew when it needed more relish or another spoonful of mayonnaise. Ham salad sandwiches tasted like comfort shaped by experience, a reminder that inexpensive food could still feel generous and deeply satisfying. They were born from frugality, but remembered as pure warmth. Pork chop sandwiches gave thin-cut chops a starring role in a dinner that felt hearty yet required little effort. Lightly seasoned pork chops hit a hot skillet and browned in minutes, their edges turning crisp while the meat stayed juicy inside. Soft sandwich buns toasted nearby, ready to cradle the sizzling chops as soon as they were done. Some families added pickles or a smear of mustard for tang, while others kept it simple, letting the rich flavor of the pork shine on its own. The entire meal came together before the evening news finished its first story, a perfect option for nights when work ran late. Each bite balanced the tender meat with the soft bread, creating a combination that was both rustic and satisfying. Affordable and fast, these sandwiches showed that even a modest cut of meat could deliver the comfort of a full supper without hours in the kitchen, keeping hunger at bay and spirits high. Cucumber and mint cream cheese boats offered a cool escape from the summer heat. Large cucumbers were halved lengthwise and carefully scooped to form shallow boats ready to cradle a refreshing filling. Cream cheese was whipped until soft, then mixed with finely chopped fresh mint, a splash of lemon juice, and a pinch of salt. The smooth mixture was spooned into the cucumber shells and chilled until firm enough to slice into neat sections. Each bite combined the crisp snap of the cucumber with the creamy tang of the cheese and the bright fragrance of mint. These boats added a burst of green color to long tables covered with pies and fried meats, and they stood out as a light option amid the heavier fare. Children liked the fun shape, while adults savored the cooling freshness on a hot afternoon of music and fellowship. They embodied the ingenuity of picnic cooks who used garden produce and simple dairy to create a dish that felt elegant yet entirely homemade. Tipsy Parson wobbled onto Christmas tables carrying centuries of English tradition and considerable amounts of sherry. This layered trifle began with sponge cake soaked in sweet sherry until thoroughly saturated, then spread with jam and topped with rich custard and whipped cream. The alcohol permeated everything, making each spoonful warming and slightly intoxicating. Families assembled the dessert in clear glass bowls to display the beautiful layers, each stratum visible and inviting. The name came from the notion that village parsons, known for their love of sherry, might become tipsy from such indulgence. Children received versions made with fruit juice instead, preserving their innocence, while adults enjoyed the spirituous original. Making Tipsy Parson required nothing more than patience and good ingredients, yet the result rivaled elaborate French desserts. The tradition faded as trifles simplified and alcohol content became controversial. Tipsy Parson deserved better than obscurity. Old-fashioned cream fudge was a test of patience disguised as a holiday recipe, and every seasoned cook treated it like a quiet competition with themselves. You could not rush it, cheat it, or distract yourself. You had to stand over that pot, stirring slowly as sugar and cream thickened into something rich and silky. Too hot and it would turn grainy, too cool and it would never set, which meant you needed steady hands and a careful eye. When it finally reached the perfect stage, you beat it until it lost its shine and turned into a soft, velvety mass ready to pour into a waiting pan. The fudge cooled into creamy blocks that melted on the tongue like sweet winter snow. No shortcut version ever recreated its texture, and most people stopped making it because store-bought fudge felt easier. But for anyone who remembers that slow, careful stirring, cream fudge still represents the kind of Christmas effort we rarely see today. Bread pudding transformed stale loaves into Christmas dessert, rescuing what would otherwise become waste and turning it into celebration. Every crust, every heel, every slice gone too hard to eat was saved throughout December until Christmas Eve arrived. The dried bread was torn into chunks, soaked in whatever milk the family could afford, then mixed with eggs, sugar, and precious spices like cinnamon and nutmeg. Baked until golden in cast-iron pans handed down through generations, the pudding emerged transformed from kitchen scraps into something resembling abundance. Families drizzled molasses or made simple sauces from butter and sugar to top their portions. The texture was both tender and substantial, the sweetness balanced by honest bread flavor. Bread pudding taught children that nothing should be thrown away, that creativity could rescue the humblest ingredients. This dessert carried Christmas forward when fancy cakes and store-bought sweets were impossible dreams for struggling households. Egg and onion sandwiches were proof that you did not need much to make something stick with you, and grandparents understood that better than anyone. They would boil eggs the way only older hands know how, never cracking and always perfectly tender. Then came the onions, diced sharp and small enough to blend into the mix, but bold enough to give the sandwich its signature kick. Add a spoonful of mayonnaise or a tiny splash of vinegar, and suddenly you had the kind of filling that could feed a whole table without anyone feeling shortchanged. Grandparents scooped the mixture onto soft bread with a seriousness that made you think you were eating something far fancier. The sandwich had the creaminess of a corner deli order and the bite of something crafted by someone who knew how to stretch every ingredient. Maybe it was the onion that made it feel grown up, or the eggs that made it feel comforting, or the way grandparents piled it on thick. Whatever the reason, it tasted far bigger than its small cost. Egg and onion sandwiches were quiet generosity served between two slices of bread. Horseradish beet sandwich brought bold flavor and vivid color to the table with shredded beets mixed into a creamy horseradish dressing and spread generously on slices of hearty rye bread. The sweet earthiness of the beets balanced the sharp heat of the horseradish for a taste that was lively and unforgettable. Families discovered this recipe during the 1940s when root vegetables were plentiful and inexpensive, providing both nutrition and visual appeal. It quickly became a popular choice for winter lunches, offering warmth of flavor without requiring scarce meats. Hosts loved how the striking red filling brightened buffet tables and impressed guests with minimal effort, while tastes have grown milder over time. This sandwich remains a vivid example of how thrifty ingredients can create striking dishes that delight the senses and satisfy the appetite, making it a true vintage treasure for adventurous modern eaters seeking something different and colorful. Water chestnut bacon wraps brought a surprising crunch to the picnic table. Whole canned water chestnuts were drained and patted dry, then wrapped in strips of smoky bacon secured with wooden toothpicks. Each bundle was brushed with a light glaze of brown sugar and soy sauce before being broiled until the bacon turned crisp and caramelized. The result was a savory sweet bite with a satisfying snap at the center. These little morsels were perfect finger food, disappearing quickly from platters as children and adults alike reached for seconds. They traveled well and could be served warm or at room temperature, making them ideal for outdoor gatherings where timing was unpredictable. Their mix of textures and flavors delighted guests who might not have expected such a modern-tasting treat at a church picnic. The recipe showed how 1960s cooks blended pantry staples with global influences, turning simple ingredients into something exciting and memorable that encouraged conversation and friendly competition for the last piece. Now here's something that started out in the bleakest of times but quickly became a sensation throughout America even after the Great Depression ended. You can't ever beat a fried bologna sandwich. I don't care what uptown neighborhood and what fancy restaurant you've been to. Something about that mix of bologna with cheese, mayo, and sometimes even bacon and sausages is unbeatable. It was something that was incredibly beloved by the public right after the Second World War ended, and the Midwest in particular couldn't really ever get enough of it. Diners, homes, rural areas, local breakfast joints, everyone was serving an affordable fried bologna sandwich. It was something you could rely on to both satisfy your taste buds, get you a healthy dose of protein, and not break your wallet if you had it daily, which was really asking for a lot in those times. I'm glad potato pancakes and jambalaya are next to each other, because both are some pretty fine examples of how a lot of typical American meals are influenced by the many cultures and communities that exist within the nation. Jambalaya, for instance, is a Creole and Cajun original that comes right from the heart of Louisiana. It's got a fair bit of heritage from other cuisines too, namely Spanish and French ones. Jambalaya was typically introduced to the people by French settlers who had brought on most of their recipes and ways of cooking during the very early colonial time of America, specifically Louisiana. What they didn't foresee is that one-pot culture would end up popping off so well in America, and that's exactly the mold jambalaya fit into as well. Even up in the land of the oui-oui, or as they call it, France, they would typically cook this in one pot. In Louisiana, though, in the rural patches of land surrounding the state where plantations were, it was a typical meal there since a lot of the dish was centered around rice. And that was a staple. In the 1960s, Southern cuisine, especially out of places like Louisiana, had really stretched out to other parts of the country. All of this note-taking from other people's books has a reason, by the way, and I'll get into that later. Caramel pecan turtles were holiday treasures long before companies boxed them in shiny wrappers. The homemade kind began with clusters of pecans arranged on a buttered sheet like tiny turtles with little legs. Warm caramel was spooned over the top, filling the gaps and creating a chewy golden blanket. Once the caramel cooled, each piece was dipped in chocolate, turning simple ingredients into something rich. Families made these every December, often using pecans from their own yards. Children hovered close, hoping for a piece too messy to save. Homemade turtles were never perfect, which made them even better. Mass-produced versions cannot capture the warmth of a kitchen filled with chocolate, caramel, and patience. For many families, turtles were the moment Christmas felt real. Water pie was the desperate dessert that turned almost nothing into something sweet enough for Christmas dinner. When families could not afford eggs, milk, butter, or fruit, this pie emerged from sheer necessity and stubborn determination to have dessert on the holiday table. The filling was astonishingly simple: water, sugar, flour, vanilla, and small amount of butter mixed together and poured into a pie crust. During baking, the mixture transformed into custard-like filling that was surprisingly satisfying. The pie had other names in different regions: depression pie, desperation pie. Names carrying the weight of era's hardship. Children eating this pie often never knew how little it contained, only that mother had made them Christmas dessert. The crust could be made from lard and flour, ingredients even the poorest pantries usually held. Water pie represented the absolute bottom of depression experience, yet also represented triumph, love and determination, creating celebration from virtually nothing at all. Sardine and mustard sandwiches were the bold, fearless meals grandparents made when they wanted flavor, nutrition, and thrift. All at once, sardines came in tins that waited on the pantry shelf like hidden treasures. Salty and tender with enough natural oil to feel restaurant-rich, grandparents mixed them with mustard, sometimes adding onions or a splash of vinegar, and spread the mixture with the confidence of someone making a seafood cafe special. And honestly, it tasted like it belonged there. Sardines had that deep, briny flavor that made the sandwich feel worldly and far more expensive than it was. These meals filled you up and stayed in your memory long after, teaching you something about trying foods that looked humble but tasted big. Grandparents valued strong flavors, meals that woke you up and proved that good food was about skill, not money. Sardine and mustard sandwiches were a small act of boldness and a thrifty masterpiece. Shrimp and grits. Quick Bowl delivered coastal comfort with pantry convenience, turning pre-cooked shrimp and instant grits into a 10-minute feast. Water boiled while butter melted in a skillet, where garlic and a pinch of paprika released a smoky aroma. The shrimp, already cooked and cleaned, were tossed in the sizzling butter until warmed through and lightly seasoned with lemon juice. Instant grits whisked in another pot thickened in minutes, creamy and soft with a touch of salt. The hot grits were spooned into bowls and topped with the buttery shrimp and their flavorful drippings. A sprinkle of chopped green onions or parsley added a fresh finish. Despite the short cooking time, the dish tasted like a slow weekend brunch by the shore. Families loved how it brought a touch of luxury to a busy weeknight, proving that quick meals could still feel special and deeply satisfying when simple ingredients were treated with care and attention. Date and walnut tea sandwich brought a gentle sweetness to formal gatherings where coffee and soft conversation flowed. In equal measure, cooks began by simmering dates until they softened into a thick paste which they mixed with finely chopped walnuts for a filling that felt both decadent and practical. During the mid-century years, sugar could be expensive and fruit was a clever way to sweeten bread without adding costly ingredients. Tea rooms and women's clubs served these sandwiches with the crusts removed and the slices cut into delicate shapes that fit neatly on a porcelain plate. The nutty aroma paired beautifully with a hot cup of black tea and gave the impression of luxury. While remaining budget-friendly for homemakers, the mixture could be prepared a day ahead and kept in a cool pantry, which made entertaining far less stressful. Despite its elegance, this sandwich belonged to everyday life as much as it did to special occasions, making it a cherished memory for those who tasted its mellow blend of fruit and nuts. Eggnog salad. Dressing added a festive sparkle to the picnic table even beneath a blazing summer sun. Store-bought eggnog was whisked with cider vinegar, a spoonful of smooth Dijon mustard, and a drizzle of golden honey to create a creamy dressing with subtle holiday spice. Poured over crisp garden greens, sliced apples, or a simple fruit salad, it coated every bite with gentle sweetness and a soft nutmeg fragrance. The vinegar's sharpness balanced the richness, giving a flavor both celebratory and refreshing. Because it required no cooking and only a few pantry staples, the dressing came together in moments, making it ideal for last-minute gatherings when the fellowship hall was already humming with music. Elders smiled at the nostalgic taste of winter, while children enjoyed the dessert-like twist that turned plain vegetables into something special. This clever recipe proved that even a seasonal drink could be reimagined into a bright summer dish, extending holiday cheer to a sunny afternoon of fellowship and song. Celery and pimento cream. Sandwich brought a cheerful burst of color to lunch tables across mid-century America, with crisp diced celery folded into soft cream cheese, dotted with vivid red pimentos. For a bite that was both crunchy and creamy in perfect balance, the mild heat of the pimento gave the filling a lively spark, while the celery kept each mouthful refreshing and light. This was a favorite at bridge parties and Sunday luncheons because it could be prepared hours ahead without losing its texture, and it looked beautiful, sliced into neat rectangles on silver trays. Women's magazines of the 1940s promoted it as an elegant yet economical option since both celery and canned pimentos were inexpensive, and widely available hosts loved how the sandwich appealed to children and adults alike, offering a vegetable-forward treat that still felt indulgent. Though it has vanished from most modern menus, the celery and pimento cream sandwich remains a bright reminder of creative home cooking that turned simple produce into something worthy of celebration. Vegetable fried rice with leftover meat transformed scraps and day-old rice into a fragrant dinner in less than 15 minutes. Cold-cooked rice was the key, each grain separating as it hit the hot oil of a wide skillet or wok. Bits of carrot, peas, and diced onions followed, their colors brightening as they sizzled. Leftover meat, whether pork chops, chicken, or beef, was sliced thin and tossed in with a splash of soy sauce and a drizzle of sesame oil. A quick scramble of eggs in the corner of the pan finished the dish, binding everything together with soft ribbons. The result was smoky and savory, carrying the scent of garlic and ginger through the house. Families appreciated how it cleared the refrigerator of odds and ends while creating a meal that tasted planned and special. Served hot straight from the pan, it proved that yesterday's rice and scraps of meat could become a satisfying dinner that rivaled takeout, saving both time and money without sacrificing flavor or comfort. Sourdough starter bread with cold tallow and pepper was not a celebration. It was what you ate when your firewood ran low and your hopes ran lower. Dense, tangy slices of sourdough, baked days earlier, were spread with cold beef tallow scraped from a tin, then dusted with black pepper if you had it. No warmth, no sizzle, just calories and survival. This sandwich was the miner's standby, the trapper's fallback, the widow's winter lunch. Tallow kept you going. Sourdough kept you sane. You had to chew slowly, not just because the bread was dense, but because the quiet made everything feel heavier. There was no illusion here. It was a meal made by necessity, not desire. But it did its job. It filled you up. It reminded you that tomorrow might be better, or it might not. Either way, you would still eat. Coconut haystacks were one of the simplest Christmas candies ever created, but they tasted like 100 tiny holiday miracles stacked together. Made from shredded coconut mixed with warm sugar syrup, they were the candy equivalent of childhood scribbles, messy, uneven, and absolutely perfect. Mothers loved how easy they were to prepare when time and ingredients were limited, and children loved how they looked like little snowy mounds waiting to be snatched from the tray. You just heated the syrup, stirred in the coconut until every strand glistened, and dropped spoonfuls onto wax paper to set. No tricks, no thermometers, no weather conditions required. Despite their simplicity, haystacks carried the same excitement as more complicated candies because they tasted like pure sweetness and holiday energy. They were popular across the country, especially in homes where budgets were tight and store-bought treats were luxuries. Over time, they faded from Christmas tables as more elaborate desserts took their place, but older generations still talk about them with the same affection as childhood toys and snowy mornings. Coconut haystacks captured the heart of homemade Christmas candy. Cheap, cheerful, and made with love instead of precision. Potato pancakes are a lot more cultural than you think. They're deeply rooted in European Jewish traditions, and even in American Jewish communities, you always find this in someone's fridge. They have some pretty strong links to the cuisine, but despite that, the 20th century was a time when America really became known for being a melting pot of different cultures. Before that, you could say that each place had its own identity, each state its own little corner of Uncle Sam's backyard, but now it really is all one big pot. In the United States, they're typically something most people link together with Hanukkah, but they're also a really big comfort food outside of that too. There's some practical history and some cultural Jewish history to this. So, practically speaking, during the Depression and wartime, people almost exclusively lived off of potatoes. Potato skins, potato soup, potato pancakes. I mean, it was one of the cheapest and easiest ways to get a pancake during then. From there on, it took off so well that most people just kept making them even after the dust settled. It was a pretty endearing exchange of traditions from one community to another. And to be honest, I think I like potato pancakes more than the original. What about you? Would you ever try a starchy variant of a typical American breakfast, or are you booking it straight to IHOP? Green tomato pie is something that'll have you running back for seconds. First off, you gotta hand it to whoever made this dish for their ingenuity. It's not every day you get a banger of a dish that actually is centered around making the green tomato shine out of everything else. But Southern home cooking will do that for you. Charlotte's green tomato pie in particular makes use of some typical Southern spices like cinnamon and nutmeg and unripened green tomatoes, and has you making a pie that'll rival even the best apple ones you could find at bakeries. Green tomatoes have an especially great harvest during the fall, so that's when this dish would see the most mileage. You would find houses all over the South constantly making green tomato pies. And this specific pie is an example of how you don't need anything fancy to create something that can get everyone at the table. You know what's even funnier? This dish is one of the best things to come out of mock cooking because it was made to imitate mock apple pie and mincemeat pies. An imitation of an imitation ends up giving us something that was a big part of Southern culture. Who would have thought? Egg and olive spread. Sandwich carried the hearty comfort of boiled eggs while adding the sharp bite of briny olives, a simple recipe of finely chopped hard-cooked eggs, mayonnaise, and minced green olives created a filling that felt far more luxurious than its humble ingredients suggested. Homemakers in the 1940s relied on this sandwich when meat was scarce, yet protein was needed for growing children. The creamy texture spread smoothly across soft bread, while the olives added a welcome saltiness that kept every bite interesting. Many cafes and school cafeterias served it as an affordable staple, often pairing it with a small cup of tomato soup for a complete meal. The mixture could be made with leftover eggs from breakfast, which made it a natural choice for families watching their budgets. Despite its practicality, it had a distinctive flavor that kept it from feeling plain, and it remains a quiet reminder of how creativity and thrift once shaped the American lunch table. Cabbage and sausage fry-up offered big flavor and a full stomach with almost no preparation. Pre-cooked sausage slices hit the skillet first, releasing fat and spice that would season everything to come. Thin shreds of green cabbage followed, sizzling as they met the hot pan and softening into tender ribbons that soaked up the sausage drippings. A splash of vinegar or a pinch of red pepper flakes brightened the dish, while a quick toss brought everything together in less than 10 minutes. The combination of smoky meat and sweet cabbage made each bite taste richer than its humble ingredients suggested. Served alone or with a slice of bread, it filled plates and satisfied appetites without straining the grocery budget. Working families valued the ease, but they also loved the hearty, old-world flavor that reminded them of meals once cooked slowly, now captured in minutes. Pemmican and berry flatbread wraps were survival food dressed as tradition. Born from the native scouts and fur trappers who knew the land better than anyone else, this rough, nutrient-packed mash was made from dried meat, rendered fat, and crushed berries. Rolled into dense cakes or spread inside fry bread or ash cakes, pemmican could last for months and carry a man through winter. It was chewy, often sour, and left a taste that clung to your teeth. The berries, usually chokecherries or blueberries, added tartness and a rare flash of sweetness to the otherwise heavy meat paste. This was not a sandwich you bit into for flavor. It was fuel, medicine, history in your hands. Wrapped in whatever bread you had, it made the difference between starvation and another mile down the trapline. And though it came from necessity, pemmican wraps were made with purpose and pride. It was one of the few foods of the Wild West that carried with it both survival and heritage. And when the wagons moved west and hunger followed, this ancient sandwich came along for the ride. Hardtack. Christmas candy was the sparkling jewel of holiday tables, especially in the mid-20th century when homemade candies meant more than anything wrapped in foil. The process looked almost like magic to children. You heated sugar, water, and corn syrup until the mixture turned clear and glass-like, then added bright colors and simple flavors that filled the house with scents of cinnamon, clove, or wintergreen. Once the syrup reached that boiling point of no return, You poured it onto a buttered pan and waited for it to cool just long enough to cut. But here was the part that made it special. You dusted the finished cubes in powdered sugar so they would not stick together, and suddenly you had a bowl full of tiny stained glass windows that seemed too pretty to eat. Hardtack candy became a symbol of the season because it was cheap, cheerful, and long-lasting. It sat in candy dishes for weeks, ready for guests, children, or whoever wandered by. You rarely see people making it today because it requires patience, precision, and a certain tolerance for sticky countertops. Candy stores still sell versions of it, but the homemade kind had a subtle warmth, a simpler sweetness, and a charm that commercial versions cannot imitate. Hardtack was the kind of candy you remembered long after the tree came down, partly for its taste and partly for how it made the season feel fuller. Syllabub in stemmed glasses was Christmas elegance whipped into frothy perfection. This ancient English dessert combined cream, sugar, and wine or sherry, beaten until it formed soft peaks that held their shape in delicate glasses. The mixture separated slowly, the creamy foam floating above a pool of flavored liquid that guests sipped after finishing the top. Families served syllabub at the end of Christmas dinner, the light texture providing relief after heavy courses. Making it required vigorous whisking by hand, often delegated to daughters learning domestic arts. The wine needed careful selection. Too sweet and the dessert became cloying, too dry and it lacked charm. Some versions incorporated lemon juice for brightness, cutting through the richness with citrus tang. The dessert looked ethereal in crystal glasses, catching candlelight and trembling with each movement. Syllabub disappeared as electric mixers made whipped cream commonplace and the patience for hand whisking vanished. It was celebration in a glass. Hoppin' John is a dish that has some pretty rich heritage. I'm talking about African, Caribbean, and Native American roots that all boil together in the melting pot known as the South, where it first started becoming really trendy. However, the origins of the dish are actually a bit darker than just a happy coincidence that somehow got into everyone's table. Though the people who were eating it happily wouldn't know, it was first created and brought over by enslaved Africans in the American South. It made use of African rice and pork, and yes, the best part of the dish were the black-eyed peas even in those times. Now, as far as the name Hoppin' John is considered, nobody really ever knew where it first came from, or if there was a John who made this dish and brought it into everyone's lives, but the first time this name was mentioned was in the 1840s in a print. If you were down in the South in African American communities during New Year, then you would especially see a lot of Hoppin' Johns everywhere. The aroma of those peas and the smoked pork wouldn't miss anyone's nose, as the scent carried for miles and miles away. It was eaten specifically on New Year's because it was a common belief that eating Hoppin' Johns would bring good luck to people if they ate it to start the year. If you went into any new year with such a good plate of food, I'd say your luck was already pretty good. So maybe it does work? Chess tarts for Christmas multiplied the beloved Southern chess pie into individual portions perfect for holiday gatherings. Each tart shell held the same buttery, custardy filling: eggs, sugar, butter, and a splash of vinegar that gave it distinctive tang. The tops cracked beautifully during baking, creating golden surfaces that shattered with each bite. Families baked dozens for Christmas parties, the small size allowing guests to sample without committing to full slices. The filling was simple but required precise technique to achieve the right texture, neither too runny nor too firm. Some cooks added lemon or chocolate, creating variations that filled platters with visual variety. Children could eat these without the mess of larger desserts, making them practical for holiday chaos. The tarts kept well, actually improving overnight as flavors melded. Chess tarts disappeared as store-bought cookies replaced homemade holiday treats, sacrificing craftsmanship for convenience. Seafoam candy amazed children long before anyone explained the science behind it. Sugar and corn syrup simmered until amber, and then baking soda was added in one dramatic instant. The mixture erupted into foamy bubbles, rising like a living thing. Once poured onto a pan, it cooled into airy honeycomb filled with tiny holes. Some families dipped pieces in chocolate, others ate it plain, enjoying its light crunch. Seafoam was a Christmas specialty because it took timing and a steady hand. Children loved cracking it with a rolling pin and watching it break cleanly. It faded away as candies became mass-produced, but for older generations, seafoam was a reminder that simple ingredients could still create wonder. It tasted like winter magic made at home. Let's dig into 30 cheap Christmas meals poor families made during the Great Depression. Mock apple pie was the miracle dessert that fooled everyone at the Christmas table, made entirely without a single apple in sight. When fresh fruit became a luxury most families could not afford, clever cooks discovered that Ritz crackers soaked in a syrup of water, sugar, cream of tartar, and lemon juice transformed into something tasting remarkably like real apple pie. The crackers absorbed the spiced liquid, swelling and softening until they achieved the exact texture of cooked apples. Families baked these pies in cast-iron skillets, serving them warm with whatever cream the household could spare. Children often had no idea they were eating crackers instead of fruit, their faces lighting up at the familiar Christmas flavors of cinnamon and nutmeg. The recipe spread through church bulletins and word of mouth between neighbors sharing survival strategies. Mock apple pie represented Depression ingenuity, proving that holiday traditions could survive even when orchards were bare and grocery money had vanished. Macaroni with butter and black pepper offered pure comfort with almost no effort, turning a handful of pantry staples into a bowl of creamy warmth. Elbow macaroni boiled quickly in salted water while butter melted in a waiting pot. The drained pasta was tossed directly into the melted butter, and a heavy shower of freshly ground black pepper coated each piece, releasing a fragrant spice that filled the room. A small scoop of grated Parmesan, if available, added a gentle richness, but even without it, the dish delivered deep satisfaction. Ready in less than 15 minutes, it soothed the end of a long day with its silky texture and simple flavor. Children loved the mild, buttery taste, while adults appreciated the subtle heat of the pepper and the reminder that good food does not always demand a complex recipe. This humble meal has endured for generations because it proves that speed, thrift, and pleasure can happily share the same pot when hunger calls for something immediate and comforting. Carrot and raisin sandwich offered a cheerful burst of color and natural sweetness by mixing finely grated carrots with plump raisins in a light mayonnaise dressing. The carrots provided a gentle crunch, while the raisins added juicy pops of flavor, creating a balanced filling that appealed to both children and adults. This sandwich gained popularity in the 1940s and 50s, when root vegetables and dried fruit were easy to store and inexpensive to buy. Community cookbooks praised it for its nutrition and bright appearance, making it a favorite for school lunches and church picnics. Some cooks stirred in a dash of cinnamon or lemon juice for a playful twist, but the classic version remained simple and refreshing. Although it rarely appears on modern menus, the carrot and raisin sandwich proves that a few wholesome ingredients can create a meal that is vibrant, tasty, and surprisingly satisfying even without meat or fancy seasoning to elevate it. Apricot cottage cheese loaf offered a cool and creamy surprise that stood out among the many church picnic dishes of the 1960s. Slices of soft white bread were spread with a light mixture of whipped cottage cheese blended until smooth with a dash of sugar and a few drops of lemon for brightness. Sweet canned apricots were drained carefully, then chopped into small pieces and folded into the cheese to add a gentle fruitiness. Each slice was rolled tightly into a neat spiral, then wrapped in wax paper and chilled until firm. When unwrapped at the picnic, the loaf revealed beautiful golden swirls against the snowy filling, and each piece sliced cleanly without losing its shape. The taste balanced mild, tangy cheese with the soft sweetness of apricot, creating a refreshing bite that was neither too heavy nor too sweet for a summer afternoon. It traveled well in coolers packed with ice, making it a practical choice for long drives to countryside gatherings where families sang hymns and shared stories beneath tall oak trees. Children loved the bright colors, while adults enjoyed how this loaf brought a touch of elegance to the long wooden tables filled with beloved recipes passed from generation to generation. Ham and pickle relish sandwich delivered a zesty twist to leftover ham by grinding it fine and mixing it with sweet pickle relish and a dab of mustard until the filling became a tangy spread that woke up any slice of bread. It was a thrifty recipe that turned holiday leftovers into weekday lunches, stretching every bit of meat during the lean years of the 1940s. Community cookbooks praised it for its bold flavor and economical use of ingredients. Families enjoyed the bright contrast of salty ham and sweet relish, while the mustard added a gentle heat that cut through the richness. It traveled well wrapped in wax paper for school or factory lunches, and stayed moist without refrigeration, making it a favorite of workers and picnickers alike. As the years passed, delicatessens shifted toward heavier cured meats, and the humble ham and pickle relish sandwich faded from menus, but its lively balance of sweet, sour, and savory still deserves a modern revival. Skillet hot dogs with onions and peppers brought the flavor of a street cart into the kitchen without the need for a grill. Hot dogs were scored and browned in a cast iron pan, while sliced onions and bell peppers sautéed beside them in a little butter and salt. The vegetables softened and caramelized, releasing a sweetness that mingled with the smoky scent of the searing meat. Split rolls were toasted directly in the same pan to catch every bit of flavor. In less than 10 minutes, the hot dogs were nestled into the warm bread and piled high with the pepper and onion mixture, a quick dinner that felt indulgent and hearty. Families loved the one-pan cleanup and the way the dish fed a group with minimal effort. Each bite carried the taste of summer fairs and city sidewalks, proving that even a humble hot dog can become a meal worth remembering when time is short and hunger is strong. Under a sky streaked with dust and silence, salt pork biscuit sliders hit the trail like edible armor. Thick slabs of salt-cured pork, fried until the edges curled, were slapped between fresh biscuits, or hardtack if luck had run dry. This was not a dainty sandwich. It was chewy, greasy, and wildly salty, perfect for men riding 10 hours a day and chasing cattle or trouble. The salt kept the meat from spoiling and gave it a fierce bite that could jolt the senses awake after miles of prairie stillness. Some cowboys softened their hardtack with coffee. Others dunked the whole sandwich into grease drippings or gravy if a chuck wagon was near. You did not eat this with conversation. It was more of a jaw workout than a lunch. But out on the plains, you were lucky to have meat at all, much less the bread to go with it. Salt pork biscuit sliders were not made for comfort. They were made to keep you riding. And for a generation of frontier men who had more dust in their lungs than dreams in their pockets, that was more than enough. Floating Island drifted onto Christmas tables as clouds of meringue atop golden custard seas. Soft meringue was poached in milk, then floated on chilled custard made rich with egg yolks and vanilla. The contrast was everything. Airy white islands against smooth yellow depths, sweet puffs dissolving into creamy base with each spoonful. Families served this in shallow bowls that displayed the visual drama to full effect. Making the meringue required gentle handling, the poaching demanding careful temperature control to prevent collapse. Some cooks drizzled caramel threads over the islands, adding golden webs that crackled against soft textures. The custard base needed proper cooking to achieve silkiness without curdling, a skill grandmothers demonstrated rather than explained. Children competed for the largest meringue portions while adults savored the custard's depth. Floating Island required multiple techniques executed perfectly. Its disappearance reflects the loss of patience that defined holiday cooking. We're going to go forward in time a bit, all the way to the beginning of what most people consider the late 20th century, where stuffed zucchini boats first started becoming something you would hear about regularly. At bars, from your friends and colleagues, or your partners. They became really hot in the 60s and 70s when it felt like everyday people were trying another dish from a new country that hadn't really touched base in America yet. It was the first time people expanded their taste buds beyond the bacon, pancake, and hash brown breakfasts they were mostly used to. Plus, stuffed zucchini boats were really healthy. They were a lot better to eat than those aforementioned breakfasts. The best part was that you could really change up the fillings. So depending on what you wanted, you could have fully vegetarian zucchini boats or ones with ground beef stuffings. People say this is a part of Italian-American cooking, but a lot of Mediterranean cooking makes use of dishes similar to zucchini boats, like using stuffed peppers and vegetables like eggplants. Olive nut sandwich was the kind of lunch that turned a plain midday break into something memorable without costing more than a few coins. Back when cream cheese was a rare treat, people would mix it with chopped green olives and finely crushed pecans until it became a thick, flavorful spread. The salt of the olives gave every bite a briny pop, while the pecans added a faint, earthy crunch. Homemakers in the 1930s and 1940s loved this combination because it stretched a small block of cheese across many sandwiches. White bread made the perfect base since it was soft enough to absorb the filling without falling apart, and children enjoyed the smooth, creamy texture. Many church socials and small-town luncheons would feature trays of these sandwiches cut into neat triangles. They were easy to make ahead of time and kept well in a simple icebox when refrigeration was limited today. The mixture might feel unusual, but the contrast of tangy olives and sweet, nutty undertones remains striking for anyone willing to give this forgotten recipe another chance. Creamed peas on toast turned a bag of frozen peas and a little flour into a fast dinner that warmed the evening. Butter melted in a skillet while a spoonful of flour was whisked in to make a smooth roux. Then milk streamed in to form a creamy sauce. The peas went straight from freezer to pan, bright green against the pale gravy as they softened and released their sweetness. Thick slices of bread toasted in the same pan or under a quick broiler became the foundation, soaking up the sauce while staying crisp at the edges. A sprinkle of black pepper and a pinch of nutmeg gave the dish surprising depth, proof that simple pantry ingredients could still feel indulgent. Families loved how it filled plates in less than 10 minutes and cost almost nothing, making it a dependable weeknight standby. Children liked the mild flavor and the fun of cutting through the soft bread with a fork, while adults found comfort in its quiet, creamy richness. One bite carried the memory of suppers built on thrift and ingenuity, a reminder that speed and satisfaction can share the same plate when time and money are scarce, but hunger is real. Cold cornbread and lard sandwiches were not something you craved. They were what you had when craving was a luxury. Picture a thick square of yesterday's cornbread, cold and crumbling, with a generous smear of pork lard seasoned only by a pinch of salt or the leftover flavor of whatever it had been fried in the day before. There was no meat in sight, just fat and crumbs and the memory of a meal that had once been hot. Cowboys and homesteaders packed these sandwiches for long treks or slow days in the fields, not because they were delicious, but because they worked. Lard gave energy. Cornbread kept your stomach from echoing. If you were lucky, the cornbread had bits of crackling or jalapeno in it. If not, it was dry and plain and stubborn. Some folks would drizzle molasses over the top, trying to sweeten the sadness, but most just ate in silence and carried on. These were sandwiches that spoke a truth no one wanted to say out loud. Hunger made simple things enough. Old-time opera fudge was the kind of candy that vanished the second it touched your tongue, which made it feel almost magical to anyone lucky enough to try it. It was silky and impossibly light, often served at church bazaars where older women carried the recipe in their heads rather than in any book. Opera fudge was not made like modern chocolate fudge. It started with sugar, cream, and butter, cooked slowly until it reached a stage that required perfect timing. Once the syrup cooled slightly, it was beaten until it thickened and turned matte, taking on its signature texture. Children whispered about whether it would set right this time because opera fudge was unpredictable and dramatic. When it came out correctly, it tasted like soft clouds of vanilla cream. People stopped making it because it demanded patience and precision, and store-bought versions never captured its softness. Those who remember it still talk about it like a first snowfall, something beautiful and fleeting. Blancmange molded in copper forms graced Victorian Christmas tables with its pristine beauty. This milk pudding, thickened with cornstarch or Irish moss and flavored with almond extract, emerged from molds in elaborate shapes that showcased the cook's artistry. The texture was silky smooth, trembling gently when carried to the table on silver platters. Families served it with fruit sauces, raspberry, strawberry, or preserved cherries, that provided color contrast and flavor counterpoint. Making proper blancmange required attention to temperature and timing, the mixture needing precise cooking to set without becoming rubbery. Some cooks added ground almonds for authenticity. Others relied on extract alone for convenience. Children loved its mild sweetness and wobbly presentation. while adults appreciated its refined simplicity. The copper molds themselves were prized possessions, passed through generations and displayed in kitchen hutches. Blancmange faded as instant puddings promised convenience, sacrificing elegance for speed. Pecan log rolls were the kind of Christmas candy that made children stare wide-eyed at every slice. They began with a soft nougat or marshmallow center, something sweet and pillowy. Then warm caramel wrapped around it until the whole thing glowed golden. Chopped pecans waited on a board, and rolling the caramel-covered log across them was the best part, covering every inch in crunchy nuts. The mix of soft center, chewy caramel, and crisp pecans made each bite feel like 3 candies in one. Families made them in big batches, wrapping them in wax paper and storing them in tins. Making them was messy, loud, and fun. Store-bought versions exist now, but homemade rolls tasted fresher and warmer, filled with real holiday effort. They were more than candy. They were tradition shaped by hand. Oatmeal pie emerged as the poor family's answer to pecan pie, substituting humble oats for nuts that had become impossibly expensive. The filling combined oats with corn syrup or molasses, eggs, butter, and vanilla, creating texture and sweetness remarkably similar to pecan pies wealthier families enjoyed. Baked until the top turned golden and slightly crunchy, while the interior stayed gooey, oatmeal pie delivered satisfaction exceeding its modest cost. The recipe spread through communities where pecan trees did not grow, and store-bought nuts were beyond family budgets. Women shared it at church gatherings, proud of solving the problem of making fancy pie without fancy ingredients. Children receiving a slice at Christmas dinner experienced the same joy as those eating the original. Oatmeal pie represented both practical necessity and culinary creativity, proving that substitution could produce something genuinely delicious and teaching families that holiday traditions could be maintained regardless of economic circumstances. Fried bologna sandwiches were the kind of magic only grandparents could pull off, the sort of everyday wizardry that took a slice of cheap meat and turned it into something that tasted like it belonged on a downtown diner plate. You would hear that skillet pop and hiss before you ever smelled it, and somehow that alone felt like a promise. Thick-cut bologna would curl as it hit the heat, browning until it took on that deep, savory flavor that made you forget it came from the bargain bin at the grocery store. Grandparents had this uncanny way of making simple food feel big and comforting, as if they knew exactly how to turn thrift into warmth. They would press it down with a spatula like they were working a grill at a lunch counter, then drop it onto warm bread slicked with mustard or mayonnaise. Sometimes they added a slice of cheese that melted just enough to glue everything together, and that tiny detail made the sandwich feel like a special order. Maybe it was the sizzling sound. Maybe it was the smoky smell. Or maybe it was the way grandparents cooked everything as if it were meant to matter. That sandwich was cheap and unassuming, yet the moment you bit into it, you knew it had found a permanent spot in your personal Hall of Fame. Italian sausage hoagies brought the flavor of a street fair to the dinner table with little more than a skillet and a few minutes. Pre-cooked Italian sausage links browned quickly until their casings crackled and juices sizzled across the pan. Sliced onions and bell peppers joined the heat, softening and caramelizing as they soaked up the seasoned drippings. Hoagie rolls warmed in the oven until lightly crisp on the outside and tender within. When the vegetables turned golden, the sausages nestled into the rolls, draped with the sweet pepper and onion mixture, and a light scatter of shredded provolone if desired. Each bite balanced smoky spice, soft bread, and the gentle sweetness of slow-cooked vegetables. The meal felt festive, yet required almost no effort, making it a favorite for families who wanted bold taste without a long cooking session. Served with a simple green salad or a handful of chips, these hoagies brought the spirit of an Italian street vendor into a busy kitchen, showing that fast food can still be deeply satisfying and full of character when prepared with care and served piping hot. Orange cream sandwich brought a gentle dessert-like sweetness to the lunch table by blending fresh orange zest and juice with softened cream cheese until the filling became light, fragrant, and smooth spread between thin slices of white bread. It offered a citrus burst that brightened afternoon teas and school lunches alike. Families loved its refreshing flavor during warm weather and appreciated how quickly it could be prepared using only basic ingredients. Women's magazines of the 1940s praised it as a way to add variety to children's meals without extra cost, while adults enjoyed it as a simple treat. After a light supper, its cheerful color and delicate aroma made it a favorite for spring gatherings, and it often appeared alongside lemonade and sponge cake on picnic blankets. Although it has largely disappeared from modern kitchens, the orange cream sandwich stands as a testament to the creativity of home cooks who could transform everyday fruit and dairy into something quietly delightful and memorable. When the cupboard was empty and the garden was dust, you made rag soup. Well, they did not boil actual rags, praise heavens, but because this soup was made from the scraps so lowly that it was like throwing rags into a pot. Rag soup was made from water, a couple of carrots, or any other vegetable that was left rotten and, at most, a piece of meat or a bone if one were to be lucky. It was thin, hardly spiced, and was stretched to go around the whole family. You can consider it as the soup where the idea is more important than the substance. The beauty of rag soup was that it was a very versatile dish. Got a carrot and a potato? In they go. Found a pinch of salt? Jackpot. It was a meal that was prepared in a time of famine and at the same time creativity. And though it was simple, it gave heat and food during the worst conditions. Rag soup is evidence of the fact that Dust Bowl families were able to survive and cook something tasty even out of the scraps. Graham cracker icebox eclairs offered cool, creamy comfort without a minute near the oven. Layers of crisp graham crackers alternated with thick vanilla pudding in a deep dish, each layer absorbing flavor as the dessert rested in the refrigerator until perfectly set. A shiny chocolate glaze poured over the top created a beautiful finish that sliced neatly into cake-like squares, soft and luscious even on the warmest afternoon. The crackers mellowed to a tender texture that mimicked the pastry of a classic eclair, while the pudding stayed rich and smooth. Because it could be prepared the day before, it became a dependable favorite for busy church cooks juggling multiple dishes and hungry guests. Children loved the glossy chocolate topping, and adults appreciated the nostalgia in every bite. Each cool slice carried the taste of thoughtful planning and shared tradition, ending the picnic on a sweet note that encouraged everyone to linger a little longer beneath the shade trees after the last hymn faded. Egg and potato. Hash turned scraps into a filling supper that could be on the table before the day's stories were finished. Leftover boiled potatoes were diced and tossed into a hot skillet with a bit of butter until their edges crisped to a golden brown. Eggs were cracked directly over the sizzling potatoes, their yolks breaking to coat each bite in a rich sauce as they cooked. A sprinkle of salt, pepper, and maybe a dash of paprika was all it needed. The aroma of frying potatoes and eggs promised satisfaction and thrift, a meal built from yesterday's extras and today's needs. Served straight from the pan, the hash invited everyone to eat family style, forks clinking as the steam rose. It proved that speed never had to sacrifice comfort, and that the best dinners often came from making the most of what was already on hand. Turkey Club sandwich plate turned a deli standard into a full dinner that felt hearty and fresh. Triple layers of toasted bread held slices of roasted turkey, crisp bacon, ripe tomatoes, and crunchy lettuce, each tier spread with a thin layer of mayonnaise for tang. The stack was secured with toothpicks and sliced into neat quarters, revealing colorful layers that looked as good as they tasted. A side of potato chips or a handful of pickles completed the plate, adding crunch and variety. Because it required no cooking beyond a quick toast and bacon fry, the meal came together in minutes, making it ideal for hot evenings or late nights when a stove felt out of the question. Each bite offered a balance of smoky, salty, and fresh flavors that satisfied even the hungriest diner. Families loved how it felt both casual and substantial. A dinner that borrowed the best of a classic lunch while proving that a sandwich can indeed stand proudly as the evening's main event. We have had a pretty concerning lack of pies on the list so far, right? Let's fix that by going down memory lane where we can find potato and onion pies, a delicacy that took America by storm, especially in the Midwest. Dried potatoes, sliced onions sprinkled with salt, pepper, and garlic, and you had a pretty killer pie. If by some luck the average household back then had some cheese to spare as well, then some serious fine dining would take place. Parmesan cheese was something Grandma incorporated much later when it became readily available again, but the authentic gritty potato and onion pie of the early 30s was an experience in and of itself. Bacon. Crackers, I mean, sure, they're pretty good even as a typical easygoing breakfast, but what do we really do here? You eat something enough times, you tend to get used to it and get bored. How do you get around that? Well, since the topic is retro dishes, we used to hear a lot about bacon bow tie crackers back in the day. It was something you could find for breakfast or a cocktail appetizer, which is some serious versatility. The crackers were extra crispy since they were wrapped inside bacon and then baked until the bacon itself was pretty crispy. It was the perfect combo, and all they needed was each other to realize that. It was smoky but sweet. It was also savory, but buttery smooth and not dry at all. Dishes that are such neat little combinations like these are often hiding right under your nose, and if we didn't have the imagination of so many home chefs who found these and got them into the public sphere, then we'd be a lot more tasteless as a country. So the next two dishes we have on the list are actually some classics right out of Africa and its many varied cuisines. First off, we have chicken and collard greens pilau, which is just the perfect dish to have if you're aching for something that involves a lot of rice in it. The steamed and boiled chicken mixed with the pilau as a base for the dish gives it an aroma that's pretty much unbeatable. Back in the middle of the 20th century, if you really wanted to experiment with some foreign cooking and tastes, then you would go into African American communities and try out the best of their soul food. You'd have to look around a little for the really nice restaurants, especially if you were in places like the southern parts of America, but nonetheless, people found a way. Pilau itself is also a dish that's extremely common in the subcontinent for many reasons. People use basmati rice for this, which is a little different from the rice you guys might be used to, but if you give it a shot, you might find that it has a more full flavor all around. Also, don't even get me started on how good this is for you. If you're a gym bro looking for a great way to add some tasty protein and carbs to your diet, then chicken and collard greens with some pilau is a pretty flawless place to start. There really was a dessert called sawdust pie, and people really did make it during the Dust Bowl. And yes, sawdust was used. Okay, not the sawdust in the literal sense, but the breadcrumbs or other leftovers that created the dry and crumbly feel of the pie. It was made sweeter, flavored with spices, and baked into a product that looked like a dessert. The main ingredient was frugality. Staple ingredients such as flour and sugar were rationed, and therefore cooks had to make do with available ingredients. Breadcrumbs, crushed crackers, or even ground nuts, if one had been fancy, became the base for this pie. A little molasses or syrup added, and you'd have a dish that might not win the bake-off but can do the job of satisfying a craving in the middle of the night. The name sawdust pie alone would turn anyone's stomach, but it was actually food and, I must admit, rather creative. It was not about opulence. It was about turning the essence of food into a dessert, literally a crumb. Today, there are still recipes for sawdust pie, but they use coconut and pecans to make it a little bit more fancy. Would I try it? Of course, if someone says it is the new style and not the original straight from the Dust Bowl, because even a pie that goes by the name of sawdust needs a bit of appreciation, doesn't it? Pineapple cream cheese sandwich was a bright surprise in an era when winter fruit was rare, and often canned families would drain crushed pineapple until it was almost dry, then fold it gently into softened cream cheese to create a light tropical spread when placed between thin slices of crustless bread. It offered a refreshing contrast to the heavier savory meals of the 1950s. This sandwich appeared at baby showers, church potlucks, and summer picnics where its cheerful flavor reminded guests of faraway places. Many cooks added a touch of lemon juice to keep the filling tangy, and to balance the sweetness of the fruit. Children loved the mild sweetness, and adults appreciated how easy it was to prepare. Especially when other ingredients were hard to find, the mixture also stored well in a cool kitchen, so it could be made in the morning and served in the afternoon with no loss of texture. Even now, one bite of this soft and creamy blend can transport a person to those lively mid-century gatherings. Patty melt on rye delivered diner flavor in a fraction of the time, making it a favorite among families who craved something special after a long shift. Ground beef was quickly shaped into thin patties and pressed flat on a hot griddle until sizzling and browned. Meanwhile, onions sliced paper thin softened in butter until golden and sweet, their aroma drifting through the kitchen. Slices of rye bread were spread with more butter, then layered with the beef, the onions, and generous slices of melty Swiss or American cheese. A few minutes back on the skillet brought everything together, the bread crisping as the cheese oozed around the edges. The result was a sandwich that tasted like a full diner meal, yet came together faster than any takeout order. Served with pickles or a handful of chips, the patty melt satisfied both hunger and the need for something comforting, proving that a fast dinner could still feel like a small luxury at the end of a demanding day. Then, canned soups and chow mein noodles that you could get that were already pre-cooked made things even easier for most people. America's moved past its experimental stage with food, which is why this dish wouldn't work today. But back then, it was definitely something new, if nothing else. We're going to end this list with perhaps the biggest experiment people ever did, which was mixing vegetables, particularly salads, with Jell-O. The end result was the savory jelly salad, which was, to say the least, pretty divisive. The savory jelly salad is infamous, and some would even say notorious is a better word. It was a dish that you would see in all kinds of cookbooks and family collections from the 50s and the 60s, but it wasn't something you would ever see in restaurants or salad bars. People would take conventional salads like tuna salad and ham salad or even Waldorf salad and mix Jell-O in it. It would usually be set with colored gelatin, which at least made them look very pretty. The public reaction to these was insane, though. Some people thought these new kids were taking things too far and ruining American eating, whereas others were finally happy to have a salad they could vibe with too. What's your take on gelatin? I don't hear about it too much in our age, but I think it's still got a way better rep now than it did back then. Roasted coffee-glazed pork sandwich wasn't a thing of indulgence. It was what you did when the camp coffee was bitter, the sugar was crusted at the bottom of the bag, and the pork belly needed cooking before the flies caught wind. Cowboys would brew up a dark pot of yesterday's coffee, reduce it with sugar, and brush it onto the pork before setting it over the coals. The glaze would sear into the fat, giving it a bark that was smoky, sweet, and slightly burnt like all good trail food ought to be. Once roasted and cooled, slices were shaved thin, if you had a knife sharp enough, and stacked between two hunks of bread or biscuit. The bitterness of the coffee mixed with the pork's salt and fat in a way that stuck with you, both in flavor and in memory. Sometimes they'd add a ring of raw onion or a smear of mustard if a tin was rolling around in a saddlebag. But more often it was just meat and bread and the taste of fire. Out on the trail, this was the closest thing to a delicacy a man might ever know. Peach and cottage cheese. Sandwich captured the cheerful sweetness of summer with canned peaches mashed gently into creamy cottage cheese for a filling that was both refreshing and satisfying. This mixture was spooned onto soft white bread, sometimes chilled beforehand for extra coolness. On hot days, the mild tang of the cottage cheese balanced the syrupy fruit, creating a flavor that felt indulgent without being heavy. Families discovered this recipe during the 1940s when canned fruit became a pantry staple and cottage cheese was celebrated for its protein content, making the sandwich both economical and nourishing. It was especially popular for picnics and garden lunches because it traveled well and stayed pleasant even without refrigeration. The peach and cottage cheese sandwich remains a sunny reminder of how simple ingredients could brighten a table and bring a taste of warm weather to any meal year-round. Ham and cheese biscuit sandwiches turned leftovers into a satisfying handheld meal that tasted like a weekend treat even on the busiest night. Flaky biscuits baked from a can or quickly mixed from scratch rose high in the oven while slices of baked ham warmed in a skillet. As soon as the biscuits were golden, they were split open and layered with the savory ham and slices of sharp cheddar or mild American cheese. A few minutes back in the warm oven melted the cheese into a gooey blanket that glued everything together. The salty ham, buttery biscuit, and rich cheese made a perfect combination that required no side dish and no long wait. For families coming home late, this sandwich was both supper and comfort, a way to turn yesterday's roast into tonight's fast feast. Children grabbed them hot from the tray, and the memory of that warm bite remains an echo of efficiency and home-style pleasure. Don't underestimate the versatility of cotton. It is not only used to produce clothes. When the Dust Bowl hit, farmers learned that they could take cottonseed, no joke, it's a byproduct of cotton cultivation, and make a loaf of something that could be eaten. Cottonseed loaf was the ultimate frugal meal, the idea of turning what was essentially waste into the main course. Cottonseed was poisonous and had to be cooked to remove the poison. Then it was ground and then added to flour, water, and whatever spices and leftovers people had. It's sort of like a meatloaf's distant relative, only there is no meat and, well, there's not a whole lot of taste. The loaf was heavy, tough, and by no means delicious, but it was quite healthy to sustain the people. The idea was not entirely radical. Cottonseed is very high in protein, and since it was already being fed to animals, it was only a short jump to try it out on humans. Spoiler alert, they could, but at the cost of a little pain. When the options are between cottonseed loaf and nothing, then the cottonseed loaf does not look too bad at all. Moreover, it is a good lesson on how people have to exist with what they have, even if what they have is cotton. No, this isn't a prank. Despite the prices of white sugar dropping as a whole after the First World War, leading molasses to decline in popularity, they made a strong comeback as the engine fueled a great batch of molasses cookies. People also started abandoning white sugar during the Second World War, and it caused them to look for alternatives for their yearly Christmas baking sessions, and the government was already pushing on molasses for widespread public use pretty hard. Eventually, people saw the value, and the ones that did not have to because it was so much cheaper to get molasses than any other ingredient. That, along with some sorghum syrup, meant that people could still enjoy a fresh batch of hot cookies and warm milk to welcome the winter. It might not seem like much, but maintaining tiny traditions like that meant a lot to people and kept their spirits going as the days got harder and costlier. Long after the jars were empty, people remembered that simple blend of tangy dairy and golden cereal as proof that even breakfast could be turned into a festive drink for friends and family. Cottage cheese snowballs brought a cool touch of sweetness to tables already heavy with pies and cobblers. Soft cottage cheese was whipped with powdered sugar and a dash of vanilla until smooth, then rolled into bite-sized spheres that were chilled until firm. Each ball was rolled in a blanket of fine coconut flakes, transforming them into snowy little treats that glistened under the picnic shelter lights. Some cooks tucked a hidden cherry or pecan half inside for a surprise bite, while others left them pure and creamy. They required no baking, no stove, and barely any cleanup, making them ideal for busy church ladies preparing for a crowd. Children loved the way the coconut stuck to their fingers, and adults appreciated the not-too-sweet flavor that paired well with coffee or iced tea. Packed in wax paper-lined tins, the snowballs stayed cool for hours, even on hot afternoons, offering a refreshing finish after plates of fried chicken and potato salad. Each bite felt like a small celebration of simplicity, proof that a few humble ingredients could create a memorable dessert with both charm and comfort. Tomato aspic sandwich brought a dramatic look to the table with bright red gelled tomato slices set carefully on buttered toast triangles. For a combination that was cool, tangy, and visually striking, the savory aspic carried the essence of ripe tomatoes, mixed with a gentle seasoning of celery salt and lemon juice, creating a delicate flavor that surprised first-time tasters popular at mid-century luncheons and cocktail parties. It offered a sophisticated alternative to heavier meats and cheeses, and could be prepared a day ahead to free hosts from last-minute work. Guests admired the jewel-like appearance and refreshing bite, especially during warm weather gatherings. While tomato aspic has mostly disappeared from modern menus, it remains a testament to the creativity of cooks who turned basic vegetable juice and gelatin into a centerpiece sandwich, proving that presentation and taste can be achieved with modest ingredients and a touch of patience. Cornbread and pinto beans bowl turned leftover staples into a 10-minute dinner that warmed both stomach and spirit. Cold cornbread from the previous night was crumbled into wide bowls, while a pot of pre-cooked pinto beans reheated on the stove with a splash of water and a pinch of chili powder. As the beans bubbled, their smoky scent filled the air, carrying memories of long simmering meals that once took hours. The hot beans were ladled over the cornbread, their broth soaking into every crumb until the bowl became a soft, savory stew. A drizzle of hot sauce or a spoonful of chopped onions added brightness, though many enjoyed it plain, letting the natural flavor of the beans and the sweet cornmeal shine. It was a dish of pure practicality, stretching yesterday's work into today's dinner without a single complaint. Quick to prepare and impossible to tire of, this simple bowl proved that good food is often nothing more than humble ingredients handled with care and eaten with gratitude. Cucumber and cream cheese sandwiches were the kind of quiet elegance grandparents brought to the table without ever calling it fancy. They would slice cucumbers thin enough to catch the light and spread cream cheese on soft bread with a steadiness that made it feel like a small treat. The cool crunch mixing with the creamy layer created a sandwich that tasted refreshing and clean. The sort of thing you might expect at a tea room even though you were sitting in a modest kitchen. Grandparents knew how to elevate simple ingredients, turning inexpensive food into something that felt peaceful and a little indulgent. When you bit into it, the crisp cucumber and smooth cream cheese made you feel like you were eating something far more expensive than it was. They used what they had and somehow made it memorable. These sandwiches tasted like calm afternoons, slow summers, and the steady comfort of people who knew how to make life feel gentle even when it was not. Fried cabbage and bacon foldovers were a skillet-born miracle. You would chop cabbage thin, let it sizzle in bacon grease until it browned and softened, then stuff it between two rough cakes of bread or griddle-made flapjacks. The bacon was not always visible. Sometimes it was just the ghost of flavor left behind in the pan. But the mix was hot, filling, and surprisingly addictive. Cabbage was cheap, easy to grow, and hard to ruin, which made it a favorite for chuck wagons and frontier kitchens alike. Fold it over, wrap it in paper or cloth, and it would hold up for a full day's ride or labor in the field. This was comfort food before the word existed. Every bite had that buttery, smoky taste of bacon, and the soft sweetness of cabbage turned golden. You did not need cheese or sauce, just fire and timing. It was the kind of sandwich that made the best of what little you had and taught you to never waste a scrap of flavor. In the 1960s, Beanie Weenies weren't some kind of cute wintertime trend with beanies or a Halloween candy. They were actually something you'd see in school cafeterias almost all of the time. Why? What is a Beanie Weenie? Well, despite what it sounds like, it's actually a pretty good mix of baked beans, hot dogs, and some ground beef. This meant that it was one of the most popular mixes for parents to make during times when they had to get to work, but their kid had to get to school faster. If you're one of those people who never finds enough time to make a breakfast from scratch in the morning for their little critter, I think you might still see the value in something like this. How did Beanie Weenies emerge, though? Well, between pop culture references in shows like The Simpsons and The Goldbergs, a list of stores in every area selling affordable canned versions of the ingredients, and Beanie Weenies in general sneaking into all aspects of American life, even the military, I'd say the dish has had many places to grow some really positive PR for itself. Some dishes just exude an air of comfort and homeliness, like being back in your childhood neighborhood at 7 a.m. on a really sunny day. This was definitely one of those. Let's not forget all the times a well-made bacon and onion sandwich made the difference between an exhausting, bland day and one with a warm and welcome surprise. Most people would be real cautious with their bacon, as the days of simply frying up a few strips and eating them as is were gone. You had to make each cut of meat count, especially bacon. While it was still attainable on average, its new prices were not doing anybody any favors. So people would dice up some onions, sauté them until they were that perfect golden brown, and make the bread themselves. Sometimes out of stuff like sawdust when dough would not be available, and there you had it. A perfectly vitalizing sandwich ready to put the spirit back into your tired body. Grandmas had this perfected down to a science, as they seemed to have developed a natural intuition for how much bacon, salt, and onions a good sandwich needed. Carrot tops, the lost greens that were anything but lost during the Dust Bowl. When fresh vegetables were out of season, nothing was thrown away, not even the green tops of carrots. Carrot top salad made these usually discarded greens into a rather healthy meal. The greens were chopped, dressed with vinegar or lemon juice, and combined with any leftovers of vegetables or wild greens that could be found. If you were really fancy, you might add some more olive oil or a dash of salt. The result? A sharp, sour dish that was anything but luxurious, but was instead a nutritionist's dream. Carrot tops have a robust, somewhat pungent taste, so they are considered a luxury item in today's terms. However, as they say, when the going gets tough, the tough get eating, and Dust Bowl families were certainly tough. Fun fact, carrot tops are not only edible, but also rich in nutrients such as vitamin K and other vitamins and minerals. I'd like to try this salad, perhaps, if there is enough dressing to offset the bitterness. It is not something I would run for, but I do appreciate the creativity of using leftovers to get food. If there is one thing that the Dust Bowl did, it showed that although survival may not always be pretty, it is always impressive. Oyster Cracker Scramble offered a clever way to stretch a few eggs into a filling dish for a crowd. A skillet of butter was heated until foamy, then handfuls of plain oyster crackers were tossed in to soak up the flavor and toast lightly. Beaten eggs were poured over the crackers and stirred gently until just set, the crackers softening slightly while still holding a bit of crunch. A sprinkle of black pepper and a dash of milk gave the scramble a comforting richness without the need for extra cheese or meat. It was quick enough to make on a camp stove or church basement hot plate, which made it ideal for early morning preparations before the congregation arrived. Served with sliced tomatoes or fresh fruit, it provided a hearty breakfast or midday snack that tasted far more luxurious than its humble ingredients suggested. Families appreciated how far a carton of eggs could go when combined with a simple box of crackers, proving once again that frugal creativity brought people together over meals that nourished both body and spirit. Apple and sharp cheddar sandwich showcased the perfect marriage of sweet fruit and strong cheese, a favorite in New England, where crisp autumn apples were plentiful cooks, sliced tart apples thinly, and layered them with aged cheddar between slices of toasted rye bread. The mild heat of the toast softened the cheese slightly, allowing it to mingle with the juice of the apple for a balanced bite. This sandwich was a lunchtime staple for farmers who needed a meal that traveled well and stayed fresh during long days in the field. Children carried it to school, wrapped in wax paper, while parents enjoyed it with a hot cup of coffee at midday. Its popularity spread beyond the Northeast during the 1950s, when supermarkets made sharp cheddar more widely available even today. The combination of sharp, savory cheese and crisp, sweet apple stands out as a timeless example of how simple regional ingredients can create a sandwich that feels both rustic and refined without any unnecessary extras. Fried bologna. Sandwich with mustard brought quick satisfaction to tired working families who needed a hot dinner without fuss. Thick slices of bologna were scored so they curled as they hit a sizzling cast iron skillet, filling the kitchen with a smoky aroma that signaled something good was minutes away. While the bologna browned, slices of white bread were lightly toasted and brushed with butter for extra flavor. A generous swipe of yellow mustard added tang, and some cooks layered in thin slices of onion or a single leaf of crisp lettuce if they had it. The heat from the skillet gave the meat a crisp edge and a savory depth that transformed a humble cold cut into a hearty main course. Children loved the salty, slightly sweet taste and the way the sandwich stayed warm as they carried it to the table. Parents loved that dinner was ready before the evening news began. It was fast, filling, and cheap. Everything a working household needed at the end of a long day. Even today, one bite of that hot sandwich can summon memories of late nights, hard work, and the comfort of a meal that respected both time and appetite. Scrap sausage and apple chokecherry chutney rolls were the Wild West version of sweet and savory. Whatever bits of sausage were left, spiced pork, beef, even squirrel, were mashed, fried, and rolled into rough bread with a dollop of wild chutney made from apples and foraged chokecherries. The result was something almost elegant, though no one at the time would have called it that. The chutney was tart, almost bitter, but balanced the grease and salt of the sausage like it was meant to. You would make these sandwiches for long rides, special meals, or when someone needed cheering up. You could wrap it in wax cloth or eat it right off the griddle. Either way, it was warm, sticky, and full of contrast. Sweet fruit and wild meat, smoke and sugar. These sandwiches were the kind you remembered long after you had eaten them. They were resourceful and emotional. They made use of everything, even sadness. Slumgullion stew is an American dish that became known for how easy it was to prepare. I mean, seriously, you think of stews, and your mind immediately goes to all the hard work and blood and sweat that goes into making a proper one, especially if you're cooking for a decently sized group. Some of these stews could get real costly too, but not slumgullion, no. This dish was a comfort food recipe that had been twisted, diluted, and transformed in so many ways across the decades, but still always managed to retain what made it work. That's very rare for most recipes, as they often lose their original essence in translation from one era to another. A slumgullion stew typically looks like lots of beef, macaroni, greens like canned tomatoes, corn, and beans. And they would also throw in chili beans and vegetable soups to add to the broth. By the 1960s, suburban living had become the norm, and a family diner was what most people were buying their groceries for. Slumgullion stew was a mouthful to eat and say, so it worked really well. Egg drop soup sounds a little fancier than it is, but have you never had a simple dish that knocked the socks off of you? Just a 2 or 3 ingredient show that really hit home, ticked every box, and left you with a smile? Egg drop soup was a lot like that. It was just diced potatoes and onions, which might get you thinking of the pie we just went over, but this is more like a broth. If chicken broth was there, then of course that was the foundation, but water worked too. Once the potatoes started cooking, you would drizzle some scrambled eggs before adding whole ones. It might look lumpy and score a little less for presentation, but it deserves a solid A+ just for the taste alone, especially if you would pair it with some leftover bread. 100 cheap meals our grandparents ate to survive. If any of these meals brought back someone you miss, leave their name in the comments and tell us what they used to cook. This whole list exists because ordinary people figured out how to feed a family when the money was not there. They did it with patience, a hot stove, and whatever was in the cabinet. No cookbooks, no fancy ingredients, just hands that knew what to do. Share this video with someone who still remembers eating this way. And if you have not subscribed yet, now is a good time.